Chapter 1561. The Collapse of the Sacred Altar and Falling to Rock Bottom. Chapter 1561. The Collapse of the Sacred Altar and Falling to Rock Bottom. Thanks to your inverse cultivation test, I have returned to a newborn state, the king of venomous worms complained. Newborn state, which is equivalent to a newborn human baby. Jian Wushuang was stunned. That's right. If you were to fight with someone now, don't hope for me to help you recover your divine power. The king of venomous worms was obviously not happy. In my current state, how could I fight anyone? Perhaps even a random universe god could kill me easily. Jian Wushuang forced a smile. However, it was obvious that his mood had become slightly better. During the next period of time, Jian Wushuang stayed at the Sword Star quietly and lived the life of a normal person. As for the news of Jian Wushuang being poisoned by a potent poison and losing his abilities completely, it spread quickly within the 10 cultivation sanctuaries like a storm. Countless experts within the 10 cultivation sanctuaries were shocked by the news, especially the experts on the Universe God ranking list. No one had expected Jian Wushuang, who had displayed his impressive talents in Wu Bei's cave not long ago, and was thus recognized by experts everywhere as one of the top geniuses by the eternal chaotic world, to actually experience such a change abruptly. This had completely exceeded everyone's expectations. After getting to know such news, some people sighed emotionally, some people gasped in surprise, and some people pitied him. However, there were of course people who were delighted at his misfortune. For example, Zidongwang, who was ranked 4th in the Universe God ranking list. When he knew about Jian Wushuang's change, he laughed delightfully. Poisoned by a potent poison, lost all his abilities, and is even inferior to a normal person. Haha, Jian Wushuang, I didn't expect you to end up like this one day. It's best for you to stay in this state forever. Back then, Zidongwang had suffered greatly due to Jian Wushuang. As such, he naturally hated Jian Wushuang. Apart from people like Zidongwang who hated Jian Wushuang, there were also people who had good relations with Jian Wushuang. For example, Duan Lingfeng had sent a message at once to ask him how he was doing. To the people who were concerned about him, Jian Wushuang had an easygoing look, and he said that he was all right. However, everyone knew without a doubt that his condition was not looking good, and Jian Wushuang was hanging on with all his might. Time passed by. In the blink of an eye, 3,000 years passed. Under a big tree at the Sword Star, 4 shadows sat together. Among the 4 people apart from Jian Wushuang, there was Ling Feibai, Long Ye and Xian Yi. The 3 of them had some form of friendship with Jian Wushuang, and for the past few years, they came to the Sword Star occasionally to meet Jian Wushuang. As for whether Jian Wushuang possessed the same abilities in the past, they were not concerned about it. Jian Wushuang, the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace is about to begin in a few days' time. Ling Feibai looked at Jian Wushuang and said, The battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace? Jian Wushuang's expression changed, and he laughed nonchalantly soon after. Time really passes very fast. Another 5,000 years have passed in the blink of an eye. He remembered that before Wu Bei's cave opened, Lineage of Star had just held a battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace. Up to the very moment, he felt that 5,000 years' time had passed in just a split second. I am not participating in the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace this time around, Jian Wushuang said. Not participating? Ling Feibai, Long Ye and Xian Yi, who were beside one another, looked at one another. After that, they nodded their heads. All of them knew that the abilities of Jian Wushuang had not recovered at all. Hence, at his current state, he could not participate in the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace. Moreover, rumors of it being impossible for Jian Wushuang to recover had already spread through the lineage of Star a long time ago. After all, a total of 3,000 years had passed. By his logic, if his abilities could recover, they already should have. However, at that very moment, there were still no signs of him recovering. Thus, this caused over 70 to 80% of disciples and experts of the lineage of Star to think that it would be impossible for Jian Wushuang to ever recover. As for the remaining people, they were disciples who worshipped Jian Wushuang's previous fighting achievements blindly, and they still believed firmly that there would come a day when Jian Wushuang would recover. However, after many days, the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace was held. After Jian Wushuang forfeited, those disciples' final belief disappeared gradually. Everyone believed that the legend created by Jian Wushuang, where the sacred altar, that he was carried to by countless universe god experts, due to his impressive abilities in Wu Bei's cave had collapsed. Since the sacred altar had collapsed, Jian Wushuang had fallen to rock bottom. There was probably no chance of him struggling in the future. Even the Vientiane Tower had removed Jian Wushuang's name from the newest universe god ranking list. 3,000 years ago, he had been a genius who was talked about enthusiastically by numerous experts in the eternal chaotic world. However, at that very moment, he had become a topic that the experts sighed about occasionally. Even within lineage of Star, there were also people who had been dissatisfied with Jian Wushuang. After all, in the lineage of Star, one had to be in the top 5 in the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace, to be recognized as a Star Palace disciple. During the most recent battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace, Jian Wushuang had forfeited straight away. On principle, he should be reduced to a normal disciple. However, in actual fact, the lineage of Star had kept his position as a Star Palace disciple. Therefore, he still had the right to obtain a great amount of resources that would be available to Star Palace disciples. For example, the Sword Star, as well as its mates, were the privileges of a Star Palace disciple, and Jian Wushuang still had them to himself. This had naturally caused quite a number of people to be envious of him. Even so, they were pushed back by Hall Master Yuan forcefully. Inside a secret room within the Sword Star. 3,000 years have passed. The inverse cultivation test of the third heaven had gone on for a total of 3,000 years. In spite of that, I feel that this test is still far from completion. Jian Wushuang was sitting down with his legs crossed in his position, and he was getting a feel for his own body. The Jian Wushuang of that very moment was still no different from a normal person. He still had white hair, and an old look, as if he could die any moment. There are still many years ahead of me, and I cannot stay at the Sword Star all the time. If not, my mind will definitely collapse and I will go crazy, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. He was very certain of how much he had suffered over the past 3,000 years. If not for his mind being exceptionally strong, and having reached the peak of the first level, he would have broken down a long time ago. If it were other people, even if they were real gods, they would definitely go crazy during the 3,000 years. Losing all his abilities abruptly, falling from a sacred altar to rock bottom, and being reduced to a normal person abruptly. This was just like a monarch who had stood at the top becoming a beggar overnight. Moreover, it was a beggar who could not see any hope or light. Was this something that a normal person could bear? Moreover, it was not known how long such a situation would continue for. If Jian Wushuang were to stay in the lineage of Star all the time, he would not be able to take it either. Thus, he contacted Hall Master Yuan at once. Hall Master Yuan, I wish to go out to take a walk. Jian Wushuang spoke of his own intentions straight away. Yes, it's about time for you to go outside and take a walk. Hall Master Yuan agreed as well. Tell me, where do you want to go? I am only a normal person now, and it is impossible for me to travel within the eternal chaotic world. Hall Master Yuan, do you know of any place that normal people live? Jian Wushuang asked. Chapter 1562, Qing Tian Mystery Land. Chapter 1562, Qing Tian Mystery Land. Mortal World. Hall Master Yuan thought for a while and said, in eternal chaotic world, power is the most important thing. The moment a human is born, their main focus is to cultivate. No matter in which eternal world, it isn't easy to find an immortal world. However, I do know of a mystery land. Although there are many cultivators, there's also a place for commoners. The name of the mystery land is Qing Tian Mystery Land. It's under the control of Green Feather Pavilion. Green Feather Pavilion is within Star Land. If you'd like to go to the mystery land, let me arrange it for you. Sorry for the trouble, Jian Wushuang expressed his gratitude. Then Jian Wushuang called for Qiuyu. Mr. Qiuyu appeared before Jian Wushuang and greeted. In the past 3,000 years, the attitudes of many disciples in lineage of Star did change drastically. However, Qiuyu and the other maidservants still respected him as before. I want to head over to Green Feather Pavilion. Give me a lift, Jian Wushuang said. Although Green Feather Pavilion was within Star Land, it was still quite a distance from lineage of Star. To Jian Wushuang, who was only a commoner, it was too far. He naturally needed to count on Qiuyu. Qiuyu naturally agreed instantly. Very soon, the two of them departed. Qiuyu escorted Jian Wushuang, and they arrived before the entrance of Green Feather Pavilion very soon. Please help us to inform them that the disciple of lineage of Star, Jian Wushuang, is here to visit. Qiuyu looked at the disciple guarding Green Feather Pavilion and said, Disciple of lineage of Star? The few disciples who were guarding were shocked. One of them looked at Qiuyu and asked, Are you the disciple of lineage of Star? Do you have the disciple token? I'm not. The one behind me is, Qiuyu answered. You're just kidding, right? The few disciples looked at Jian Wushuang with a strange look, and one even scoffed at the sight. They could obviously tell that Jian Wushuang was a commoner, without any fluctuation of divine power. How could such a person be a disciple of lineage of Star, which was highly respectable? This is the disciple token. You don't have to ask so many questions, just go ahead and report, Qiuyu said in a low voice. After the few guarding disciples determined that the token was genuine, they didn't delay any further, but went to report immediately. Very soon, Master of Green Feather Pavilion, and a few real gods came to greet him personally. When they saw Jian Wushuang, Master of Green Feather Pavilion, and the few real gods were shocked at the sight. I heard that the genius in lineage of Star was schemed upon. Then he lost all his power, and became a disabled person. From the looks of it, it is true indeed. Master of Green Feather Pavilion muttered to himself, and invited Jian Wushuang in. After all, Hall Master Yuan had already gotten in touch with him regarding that. In Green Feather Pavilion, Jian Wushuang walked behind Master of Green Feather Pavilion. He walked very slowly. This is the Jian Wushuang, who was once in the 3rd place on Universe God ranking list? How did he become like this? It's really him. I heard that he was poisoned. I also heard that he made a mistake as he was cultivating, which led to the loss of his power. In short, he is simply a disabled person. If someone takes action against him, they could easily kill him. From a top genius to a disabled person, things are unpredictable. Oh yeah, why did he come to Green Feather Pavilion? I heard that he's going to Qingtian Mystery Land. There are commoners living there. This man, who was once a top genius, I'm afraid he might have to stay in Qingtian Mystery Land forever. There might be a place that can contain him. On the way, Jian Wushuang ran into many disciples in Green Feather Pavilion. The conversation that the disciples were having then, Jian Wushuang couldn't hear them at all, but Qiuyu could. There was rage churning in her eyes, but she suppressed it. Soon, they arrived before a space tunnel that had already activated. Jian Wushuang, this space tunnel leads to Qingtian Mystery Land. Master of Green Feather Pavilion smiled. Thank you. Jian Wushuang thanked Master of Green Feather Pavilion and turned around. Qiuyu, here will do. You can return now. Mister. Qiuyu was shocked. Although there are many commoners living in Qingtian Mystery Land, there are also many cultivators gathered there. It is very dangerous. How can you wander around alone? I'd better follow you and protect you. You don't need to. I want to walk around alone. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. But, Qiuyu wanted to say something. Don't worry. Qingtian Mystery Land is within Green Feather Pavilion's control. We Green Feather Pavilion naturally have to protect Jian Wushuang. Master of Green Feather Pavilion smiled. Qiuyu's eyebrows were still tightly knitted. Go! Jian Wushuang waved his hand, and his figure slowly moved forward. Then he took a leap into the space tunnel. Then, Qiuyu had no choice but to leave. Elder Ming Ba, Master of Green Feather Pavilion spoke. Pavilion Master. An elderly in a black robe walked forward. Although Jian Wushuang is a disabled person, he's a disciple of Lineage of Star after all. The higher-ups in Lineage of Star seem to have yet to give him up. As he came to Mystery Land under Green Feather Pavilion's control, we Green Feather Pavilion have to ensure his safety. Hence, you have to go to Qing Tian Mystery Land personally and follow him all the time. Don't let him die. Master of Green Feather Pavilion's voice was cold. Of course, you only have to ensure that he doesn't die. The rest don't bother. I understand. Elder Mingba nodded, then immediately went into the space tunnel. Qing Tian Mystery Land. It was a mystery land of an extremely low level. The territory of the mystery land was extremely populated, but the number of cultivators was only 10%. The other 90% was just commoners. Different from Eternal Chaotic World, the moment the person fought, he would be listed as a cultivator. But there was only differences of strength. Rolling hills at the depth of the mountain, in a forest. Pack. There was a young boy who looked only 8 to 9 years old, extremely honest and simple. He was hitting a wooden block before him with his bare shoulders. The wooden block was extremely thick. It must have been left by adult cultivators. Although the young boy gave his all by swinging simple punches and slaps on the wood block, it didn't move an inch. But the young boy was very persistent. He trained there for more than an hour, and was drenched in his own sweat before stopped. The young man panted in order to slow down his heartbeat, and breathing while his eyes were twinkling with determination that a boy of his age didn't usually have. For my mom and Xiaoqiu, I must become a warrior. I must. The young boy clenched his fists. Just then. Chapter 1563. A Celestial Being Descends. Chapter 1563. A Celestial Being Descends. Buzz. A dazzling light appeared from a tree abruptly. The light was too dazzling, and it was definitely the brightest light that the young man had ever seen. When the light glowed, a white-haired old man appeared in the young man's line of vision. Could this be the celestial being that Mother mentioned? The young man stared. At the next moment, the young man ran in front of the white-haired old man. Old mister, are you a celestial being? The young man raised his head and looked at the white-haired old man. His face was filled with excitement. A celestial being? Jian Wushuang looked at the little kid in front of him with interest. After seeing his bright big eyes, he was delighted. If he were at his peak, with his abilities, one could say that he was a god in the Qing Tian Mystery Land. However, at the very moment he was only a normal person. I am not a celestial being. I am just a person passing by this area. Jian Wushuang laughed. You're lying. I have never seen such a bright light before. Moreover, you walked out of the light. Hence you must be a celestial being, the young man said insistently. Haha. If you wish to think of it that way, then I am a celestial being. Jian Wushuang giggled and looked down. Little kid, what's your name? I am Chen Hu from the Chen family village. The people in the village call me Hu Zi, the young man said. Chen family village? Jian Wushuang's expression changed. My village is at the foot of this mountain. Old celestial being, do you want me to bring you there? The young man Chen Hu said. Sure, I will take a look. Jian Wushuang laughed. Under Chen Hu's guidance, Jian Wushuang walked toward the village at the foot of the mountain. It was an ordinary, simple village. Jian Wushuang came to a bamboo house in the village. Within the bamboo house, there was a middle-aged, married woman, as well as a 4 to 5-year-old small little girl with a ponytail. Mother, I met an old celestial being today and I have brought him with me. Chen Hu ran in front of the middle-aged married woman excitedly. The middle-aged old man caressed Chen Hu's head and looked at Jian Wushuang at once. After that, she said with embarrassment, I'm sorry, old mister. This little kid is not sensible. You are? I'm just a traveler passing by this area. As for my name, I'm Wu Chen. Jian Wushuang chuckled. Wu Chen, walking in a world, and not leaving behind any dust or mark. This was what Jian Wushuang wanted. Mr. Wu Chen, you are traveling at the big mountain alone? Aren't you scared of the mountain bandits? Chen Hu's mother asked. Mountain bandits? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Yes, This mountain is very huge, and there are more than 100 villages like our Chen family village. Of course, there is also quite a number of mountain bandits within the big mountain. These mountain bandits will rob anyone throughout the year. If someone were to not give them money, he would suffer under their hands. Also, Hu Zi's father died in their hands, Chen Hu's mother said. Is that so? Jian Wushuang nodded his head slightly. Let's not talk about this. The sun has already set. If I'm not wrong, old mister, you have not taken your meal yet, right? I have just finished preparing our meal, and you can join us if you want. Chen Hu's mother laughed and invited Jian Wushuang at the same time. Eat. Jian Wushuang had a puzzled expression. For cultivators, spiritual energy in the universe served as their food. On ordinary days, they would at most have the luck to eat a few special fruits, or a few special good foods that were delicious. As for eating to fill the stomach, Jian Wushuang had not done it ever since he became a cultivator. I gratefully accept. Jian Wushuang laughed and accepted the invitation. Plain tea and simple food. However, Jian Wushuang ate it with great relish. After the meal, it was night time and a bright moon was high up in the sky. Jian Wushuang sat at a spot halfway up the big mountain and looked down at the brightly lit, peaceful village which was below him. Compared to cultivators, ordinary humans are indeed weak, and it would not be an understatement to call them ants. However, cultivators have their own benefits and ordinary humans have their own benefits. At the very least, among the cultivators, not many of them can live such a peaceful life. With a smile, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes. One night passed. Early in the morning, at the crack of dawn, the peaceful village was already very lively. Many men of the village had appeared at the average-sized drill ground at the center of the village. They then took out their own weapons to train. Moreover, most of them trained with long spears. However, most of their spears were wooden long spears, and only a few people possessed metal spears. Jian Wushuang also went to the drill ground to take a look at the different spear skills that the people were training. Their spear skills were the simplest front stabs, carrying the spears, and walking for a long distance, as well as swinging the spears around. Although it was ordinary, they could unleash a considerable amount of power if they were to practice continuously. The pitiful thing was that the people within the Chen family village were all ordinary people. Thus, they were using the strength of a normal person. The strongest person could only lift a weight of 100 jin at maximum. Moreover, there was not even a martial artist. Humph. 8-year-old Chen, who was also holding a wooden spear that was taller than him, and he was practicing with the adults. His eyes were very determined. Although he was young, his spear skills were executed amazingly with impressive strength. After a long time, the collective training ended, and next was individual training. Hu Zi, come over here, Jian Wushuang waved. Hu Zi carried the long spear and ran over. Old mister, what's wrong? After one night, Chen Hu knew that Jian Wushuang was not an old celestial being. However, he still treated Jian Wushuang with respect. You like to use a spear? Jian Wushuang looked at Chen Hu and asked. Yes, not only me, but most of the people in the village like to use spears. For example, my father also used to use a spear. Moreover, his spear skills were remarkable, Chen Hu said. How remarkable? Jian Wushuang questioned. Not many people in the village could compete with him. Chen Hu revealed a proud expression. However, his expression changed after that. Old mister, do you know spear skills? Yes. After muttering to himself for some time, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. I know quite a few. Jian Wushuang was speaking the truth. Although he had only trained in sword principles, he also had some understanding of the other weapons. The only problem was that he was not proficient in them. However, with his realm, even a small understanding would be at the level of a sect master in the Qing Tian mystery land. Old mister, you really know of spear skills? Chen Hu was delighted, and his voice attracted the attention of quite a number of people around him. A number of the villagers then walked over to him. Mr. Chen Hu, you know of spear skills? Could you be a martial artist? The villagers also knew that Jian Wushuang was a traveler who had just happened to pass by, and his name was Wu Chen. After seeing the villagers walking over, Jian Wushuang smiled. I am not a martial artist. However, I know of some spear skills. That's great. Old mister, could you help me to see this spear that I made myself? A tough, stocky man asked delightedly. After that, he immediately executed the 3-move spear skill in front of Jian Wushuang. Chapter 1564 Mounted Gangster. Chapter 1564 Mounted Gangster. After he performed a 3-move spear skill in outstanding manner, the surrounding people were astonished. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and said, Your spear skill is shabby still. There are many places for improvement. Let me give you a few pointers. Jian Wushuang advised sincerely. Although his power had already vanished, his knowledge and experience regarding weapons were still there. After giving pointers, the powerfully built man suddenly saw the light and had a great harvest. Old Mr. Wu Chun, please take a look at my spear skill. The people in the village asked Jian Wushuang for pointers. The people in the village resided in the deep mountain, and they had no chance to meet any experts. Sometimes there were 1 or 2 warriors who would pass by, but who would bother with them? Then, they finally got to meet Jian Wushuang, and had found out that he knew so much about spear skills. Of course, they couldn't wait to ask for pointers, and also ask him their questions. Jian Wushuang was happy to teach too. He even intentionally taught the people in the village a spear skill. It was an unqualified spear skill that he had obtained back when he had first started to wander in eternal chaotic world. But to the people in Chen village, it was like getting a treasure. Later on, the people in the village would practice this spear skill early in the morning. If they were to run into a problem that they didn't understand, they would ask Jian Wushuang. Hence, Jian Wushuang was highly respected by the people in the village. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had stayed in the village for more than half a month. At the battlefield in the village, Jian Wushuang stood in a corner, while Chen Hu's sister sat by his side. She was only a little girl at the age of 4 with 2 braids, Chen Xiao. On the battlefield, everyone in Chen village was going for a battle. The battle was categorized according to age. Chen Hu won first place among the kids at the age of 8. Brother got first place again. He's so amazing. The little girl saw that Chen Hu had won the first place, and she was dancing in excitement. Your brother is not amazing, but he is hardworking enough, and he is willing to train assiduously. Brother will definitely become a warrior in the future, and I want to be like him too, the little girl said with her childish voice. Jian Wushuang smiled. Just then, dang dang, the ground suddenly shook vigorously. Clatter of horses' hooves? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Oh no, it's a mounted gangster. The mounted gangsters are here. Along with the screen, the entire village was suddenly in chaos. Hurry up, hurry up. A large number of adult men in the village took out their metal, or wooden long spears, and rushed to the battlefield. Before everyone gathered at the battlefield, bang! A loud bang, and the door of the village was pushed open forcefully. Then, a troop of almost 100 men barged into the village. Haha, Chen village, we are here to collect the yearly fees. A bright and loud laugh rang through the entire village. Yearly fees? Misters, haven't we handed in the yearly fees? An elderly in the village asked. Humph, you paid the yearly fees to Ruffian Gang. You have yet to pay to Baisha Gang. Hurry up and pay. You have to pay us twice what you paid to Ruffian Gang. A man with a scar on his face, who was leading the mounted gangsters, bellowed. What? The elderly exclaimed in surprise. Twice? How can Chen village afford it? You can't afford it? Humph, don't blame us then. Brothers, attack. Kill all the men and catch all the beautiful women. The leader of the mounted gangsters roared. Suddenly, the mounted gangsters were like strong wind. They instantly started a massacre. Everyone in Chen village was raging with anger. Bastard! Fight with them. Kill them. Let them know to not push the men in Chen village the wrong way. The people in Chen village took their weapons and fought against the mounted gangster. They were born in the depths of the mountain, surrounded by the mounted gangsters. They practiced their spear skills every day to improve their strengths in order to deal with the mounted gangsters. It was time for them to counterattack. However, the people in Chen village used weapons that were coarsely made, and most of them were made of wood. However, those gangsters were on their war horses, and using metal weapons. There were sabers, axes, long spears, and so on. Plus, among the mounted gangsters, there were quite a few warriors. Although there weren't as many of them as there were people in Chen village, the fight was dominated by them. Most of the people in Chen village were killed by the mounted gangsters directly. Damn it! On the battlefield, Chen Fu, who was still scrawny and small, saw the scene and his eyes grew red. He carried the long spear in his hand and wanted to charge forward to fight against the mounted gangster. But he moved and he was immediately grabbed by Jian Wushuang. Huzi, don't be silly. Hurry up. Bring your sister and your mom into the house to hide. What's happening here isn't something children and women can interfere with, Jian Wushuang said. But old mister, Chen Hu wanted to say something. Hurry up, Jian Wushuang suddenly bellowed. Chen Hu clenched his teeth. Then, he immediately pulled Chen Xiu, who was frightened and as pale as a sheet, and ran into the house. While Jian Wushuang stood on the battlefield and watched the massacre before him, there was suddenly a long sword in his hand. The sword was just an ordinary sword. He had no divine power then, he couldn't activate Blood Mountain Sword. He carried a variety of treasures in his hand, like some tokens that contained attack power. Those tokens could easily exterminate the mounted gangster before him the moment it was activated. However, the tokens required divine power to be activated too, hence he couldn't use them. But the only thing that he could use was an ordinary, and at best very sharp sword. Jian Wushuang took a stride forward and entered the battlefield. Just as he leapt, he wielded his sword and instantly stabbed it through a mounted gangster's throat. Then, he flicked and stabbed another mounted gangster's eyes. Then, Jian Wushuang landed on the ground. The moment he landed, he staggered and fell. Damn! Jian Wushuang's face grew grave. He was a dying old man, and his strength was far behind an ordinary adult's. He possessed great swordsmanship, but he couldn't give full play to it. Just then, he only moved a little, and he felt his strenuous. If he were to be slightly strong, like an ordinary adult man, even without the assistance of sword intention, his origins and doctrines, but with the simplest swordsmanship, he was confident he could kill all of the mounted gangster before him. What could he do? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Jian Wushuang tried his best to walk around the crowd. As he walked through one round, he killed 4 mounted gangsters. One was blinded, and the other one got his arm chopped off. But then he was also panting. Where did this old man come from? Take this. Chapter 1565 Powerless. Chapter 1565 Powerless. Where did this old bastard come from? Eat my hammer attack. A fierce shout could be heard. It was from the leader of the mountain bandits, and he was swinging a giant iron hammer around. He then jumped off from the horse and immediately headed toward Jian Wushuang violently. The leader of the mountain bandits was a true martial artist with remarkable abilities. Jian Wushuang could not dodge in time, and he could only use his sword to defend himself. In the end, bam! A loud clashing sound could be heard, and the long sword in Jian Wushuang's hands was sent flying. At the same time, he felt that the skeleton of his body was about to break into pieces from the impact. In addition, he also spit out a big mouthful of blood, and his body retreated continuously. It was only after retreating a total of 10 steps that he managed to regain his posture. However, what followed after that was a tired feeling, and his body fell backwards involuntarily. In the instant he fell down, he saw that some mountain bandits had charged into the bamboo house that Chen Hu and his family were in. No! Jian Wushuang roared madly in his mind. It was a furious roar, as he felt a dissatisfaction that he had never felt before. However, he could not do anything as his body could no longer take it at that moment. Even his consciousness went into a deep sleep slowly. Jian Wushuang's consciousness finally woke up after an unknown period of time. As soon as he woke up, he felt the extreme pain from his body. After that, he saw everything in the surrounding area, and it was too tragic to look. The whole Chen family village had become a pool of blood. Jian Wushuang stood up slowly. Everywhere he looked there were pools of blood, and a great amount of bodies strewn around randomly. These bodies were the clansmen of the Chen family village. The Chen family village was gone. The whole village had been massacred. Why did this happen? Jian Wushuang clenched both his fists tightly, and his old face started to become distorted. What a great village it had been that many people had yearned for. What honest clansmen there had been. The day before, it was still a peaceful village. In the blink of an eye, it had become a sea of blood. Moreover, everything happened in front of Jian Wushuang. However, he was unable to stop it. Powerless. It was the first time that Jian Wushuang felt so powerless. From the start of his training until that very moment, he had also experienced numerous thresholds and hardships. However, he had never felt as powerless as he was at the very moment. Without any abilities, he was just a normal person. He could only look on as the villagers were completely massacred by the mountain bandits. At the very moment, Jian Wushuang's heart was filled with rage, and even his body was trembling madly. However, his expression changed abruptly. Huzi. Jian Wushuang headed to Chen Hu's house, the bamboo house, immediately. After entering the bamboo house and witnessing the scene inside, Jian Wushuang was stunned. Within the bamboo house, Chen Hu, Chen Xiu and Chen Hu's mother were all lying in a pool of blood. In particular, Chen Hu's mother was still hugging both Chen Hu and Chen Xiu tightly. Jian Wushuang squatted down slowly and loosened Chen Hu's mother's hands while suppressing the shaking in his heart. Jian Wushuang's eyes moved. He could feel Chen Hu's breath. He was still breathing slightly. There's still hope. Jian Wushuang took out an elixir from his Qian Kuan ring immediately. Although he had lost all his abilities, his treasures were still with him. He did not have any treasures to bring the dead back to life with. However, as long as there was still breath, he could bring Chen Hu back to life. After the elixir had entered Chen Hu's body, he recovered from his condition immediately. In just a short amount of time, he opened his eyes. However, when he opened his eyes and saw the scene in front of him, he became stupefied. Straight away after that, "Mother! Xiaoqiu!" "No, no!" Chen Hu shouted continuously and tears came out of his eyes immediately. Jian Wushuang frowned as he saw this. After that, he took a deep breath and said seriously, "Huzi, let me ask you, do you wish to take revenge?" "Take revenge?" Chen Hu was stunned but he clenched both his fists tightly. "I wish to. Of course I wish to take revenge. I wish to kill that group of bandits completely, and not leave even a single one of them alive." "If you wish to take revenge, wipe away your tears. From today on, you shall follow me," Jian Wushuang said. Understood. Chen Hu nodded his head without thinking. At the same time, he used both his hands to wipe his tears. "Let's go. We should bury your mother and little sister." Together, Jian Wushuang and Chen, who brought the bodies of Chen Hu's mother and Chen Xiu to the back of the mountain, which was the forest in which Chen Hu had seen Jian Wushuang for the first time. "Now wait for me for a while." After Jian Wushuang had finished talking, he returned back to the Chen family village. As he stood in the pool of blood at the Chen family village, Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked toward the empty sky. "I know that there should be an expert of the Green Feather Pavilion nearby. Although I don't know whether you are a universe god or real god." Jian Wushuang took out a Qian Kuan ring with a wave of his hand. Inside this Qian Kuan ring, there are 10 million chaos gems. I hope that you can help me to bury the villagers of the Chen family village properly. Jian Wushuang placed the Qian Kuan ring above a stone and left after that. Not long after Jian Wushuang had left, swoosh, a shadow descended abruptly, appeared beside the Qian Kuan ring, and took it. This person was naturally Elder Ming Ba of the Green Feather Pavilion. Elder Ming Ba had remained hidden all the while. His duty was to not allow Jian Wushuang to die in the Sky Blue Mystery Land. As for what Jian Wushuang had experienced within the Mystery Land, he did not care about it. For example, Ming Ba was not concerned about the massacre that the Chen family village had experienced in the slightest. A group of commoners was only a group of ants. Therefore, they were not worthy enough for him to take action. Moreover, he would not participate in the fight between the commoners. Although Jian Wushuang was seriously injured, as long as he was not dead, Elder Ming Ba would not take action. Jian Wushuang had paid the price of 10 million chaos gems to get him to give the village a proper burial. Thus, he appeared at that very moment. Then, in accordance to Jian Wushuang's request, he buried the villagers of the Chen family village at the back of the mountain inside the forest. Even though Jian Wushuang and Chen Hu had teamed up, they still spent many hours burying Chen Hu's mother and Chen Xiu properly. Hu Zi, from today on, you shall follow me and I will teach you spear skills. Jian Wushuang looked at Chen Hu. Chen Hu was extremely emotional. In the next moment, he knelt down immediately and kowtowed to Jian Wushuang respectfully. Greetings to Master. Master. Jian Wushuang shook his head. I did not say that I would take you on as my disciple. However, if you wish to call me Master, by all means do so. Follow me. Jian Wushuang brought 8-year-old Chen Hu with him and headed to the deepest part of the forest. From that day on, Jian Wushuang started to teach Chen Hu wholeheartedly. Although he had lost his abilities, he had knowledge and experience that no one in the Mystery Land had. Not to mention that Chen Hu, who he was currently teaching, was only an 8-year-old child. Even if it were those martial artists who stood at the top in this world, and were equal to the eternal chaotic world's doctrine masters and heaven masters, Jian Wushuang could still teach them effectively. Time passed by and 10 years passed in a flash. Chapter 1566 Spear Demon Chen Hu. Chapter 1566 Spear Demon Chen Hu. In the gorge of a luxuriant forest, Jian Wushuang, who had gray hair and looked as though he was going to die any minute, was sitting in silence. On the top of the mountain before Jian Wushuang, vroom, a sudden flowing light dove down. One should know that the mountain was about 100 zhang high, and the person who dove down obviously didn't know how to travel in the air. But as he fell, bang, 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 his palm or feet would tap the mountain wall by the side and continuously unload the force. In the end, he landed flawlessly on the ground. Master. Chen Hu walked before Jian Wushuang. After 10 years, Chen Hu had grown up into a brawny, good-looking young man. He carried a purple spear on his back. Hu Zi, you're 18 this year, right? Jian Wushuang lifted his head to look at Jian Wushuang. Although Chen Hu had already grown up and become an adult, Jian Wushuang still called him Hu Zi. But Chen Hu wasn't unhappy about it. Yes, Chen Hu said. 18 years old. It's about time. We should leave, Jian Wushuang said. Leave? Chen Hu stunned. Why? Didn't you say that you want to take revenge? Unless you don't want to anymore? Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Of course not. Even when I sleep, I dream about taking revenge. Chen Hu clenched his fists, and there was a terrifying, murderous intention shimmering in his eyes. Then let's go. Jian Wushuang and Chen Hu, who had stayed in the forest for 10 years, were finally leaving. In the rolling hills, although it was only 10 years, to a mortal world, there was already a drastic change. In the past 10 years, the originally different gangs of mounted gangsters only had one left, which was Baisha Gang. Ever since Baisha Gang was founded, they had cleaned out all the other mounted gangsters and unified them in a few years' time. Until then, there was only Baisha Gang. It was said that they had more than 20 warriors, and more than 100 villages around the mountain had to pay them yearly fees. Otherwise, the village would have vanished into thin air like Chen Village 10 years ago. But then that day, a young man who held a purple long spear, who looked less than 20 years old, barged into Baisha Gang's lair alone. He called himself Chen Hu from Chen Village, and he had come to take revenge on behalf of Chen Village, which was destroyed 10 years ago. Then there was a ferocious battle. In an hour. The battle ended in merely an hour. An hour later, the 3 leaders of Baisha Gang died. The 20 warriors were all killed. As for the remaining mounted gangsters, Chen Hu killed 90% of them. One should know that Baisha Gang had thousands of men since they formed. It also meant that Chen Hu had killed more than thousands of mounted gangsters. His fierce power and terrifying massacre spread across. It instantly stirred a great commotion among the hundreds of villages at the mountain, and also the cities outside the mountain. After the battle, Chunhu was also given the name Spear Demon. Of course, Chunhu didn't care about the reputation and fame from being Spear Demon. He only cared about the fact that he had finally taken revenge. Chunhu knew clearly that his work had played a factor, but mostly, it was because of his master Wu Chen's guidance. "Master, where should we go now?" Chunhu followed behind Jian Wushuang as he asked politely. "I don't know." Jian Wushuang shook his head. "Wherever we want to walk to, I guess." "Why? You're not willing to follow the old man anymore?" "No, Hu Zi is willing to be by master's side forever," Chunhu said. "Forever? That's not necessary." Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Then, Jian Wushuang brought Chunhu out from the mountain and started wandering around the world. Jian Wushuang was still in the process of passing his inverse cultivation test. He had no idea how long it would be until the test would be over, but he was only a commoner then, and he would naturally live like a commoner. Trekking through difficult terrains and rivers, walking on foot. It was what Jian Wushuang wanted to do. Chunhu followed him. With Jian Wushuang's guidance, his power was continuously improving at a shocking speed. Actually, Chunhu had potential. Through the years he stayed by Jian Wushuang. He had never noticed, but Jian Wushuang had built up his strong constitution, using natural treasure. With the resources that Jian Wushuang had on hand, he could totally be the most powerful universe god in Qingtian Mystery Land anytime, but he didn't do that. He only wanted to teach Chunhu some basics, but didn't want to decide on Chunhu's growth. Even though Chunhu might not become a universe god all his life, Jian Wushuang wouldn't bother. As time flew past, Chunhu's power constantly improved at a shocking speed. Sometimes he would launch an attack, and his fame as Demon Spear naturally grew more prominent. In the blink of an eye, it had been 20 years. At a steep lofty mountain, Jian Wushuang held a wooden staff as he walked upwards with great difficulty. It seemed like he wanted to trek over the mountain. "Master, let me carry you?" Chunhu asked. "No need." Jian Wushuang waved, and wanted to go forward using his own strength. Just then swoosh, swoosh, there were two figures that suddenly plunged through from the void from afar. They quickly landed before Jian Wushuang and Chunhu. Chunhu squinted his eyes, and the purple long spear appeared in his hand. He looked at the two people before him solemnly. He could tell that the two people before him were extremely strong. "Mister, you should be Demon Spear, Chunhu?" One of the men in a white robe smiled and asked. "It's me. Who are you? What's the matter?" Chunhu sounded cold, and he gave out a faint glower. "Don't misunderstand. We are not here to look for trouble with you." The man in a white robe smiled. "To be frank with you, we are from Rising Sun Palace. We are here under orders to invite you to join Rising Sun Palace. With your power and your swordsmanship, you definitely could be one of the 12 deputy palace masters in Rising Sun Palace." Rising Sun Palace? Chunhu was shocked. Jian Wushuang, who had never spoken, suddenly lifted his head. He came to Qingtian Mystery Land for 30 years. He couldn't fly during the 30 years, and he had been traveling on foot. He never walks too far of a distance, and he was still in one of the dynasties in Qingtian Mystery Land. The dynasty was known as Divine Light Dynasty, and there were some sects with impressive cultivators in Divine Light Dynasty. Rising Sun Palace was one of the top sections. In Divine Light Dynasty, there were many warriors who were dreaming of entering Rising Sun Palace. Plus, a deputy palace masters in Rising Sun Palace was definitely considered to be a higher-up in Rising Sun Palace. Chapter 1567, The Old Floor Sweeper. Chapter 1567, The Old Floor Sweeper. "Master." Chunhu could not help but look at Jian Wushuang. "Since you wish to go ahead. Why do you need to ask me?" Jian Wushuang laughed. Chunhu frowned slightly, and looked at the white-robed man at once. He then said, "I can join the Rising Sun Palace. As for whether I can become a deputy palace master, I am not very concerned. However, I have a condition. Please allow my master go to the Rising Sun Palace with me." "Your master?" The two experts from the Rising Sun Palace could not help but look at Jian Wushuang. After looking at Jian Wushuang, The two of them had puzzled expressions. They could tell that Jian Wushuang was not a martial artist, and he was merely a normal person. Moreover, he was the kind of person who was about to die. He was actually the master of the spear demon, who had made a name for himself in the Divine Light dynasty. If you do not agree to this condition, the both of you can leave. I have said before that I will stay with my master for my whole life, Chen Hu said. The two white-robed men looked at each other, and one of them said soon after, I cannot call the shots for this matter. Why don't the both of you return to the Rising Sun Palace with us, and at that time, the palace master will make a decision personally. If the palace master agrees to this, there would naturally be no problem. Master, Chen Hu looked at Jian Wushuang again. No problem. Let's go. Jian Wushuang laughed apathetically. Under the guidance of the white-robed men, the two of them headed to the Rising Sun Palace at once. Upon arriving at the Rising Sun Palace, Chen Hu had an audience with the Rising Sun Palace master, and he still stated his own conditions bluntly. As for the Rising Sun Palace master, he muttered to himself many times before agreeing to allow Jian Wushuang to stay in the Rising Sun Palace. Jian Wushuang would go to the Rising Sun Palace's martial arts tower to help sweep the floor and tidy up the dust on the valuable martial arts books. Jian Wushuang had no objection to this. Thus, from that day on, Jian Wushuang allowed nature to take its course and stayed within the Rising Sun Palace. He would stay in the martial arts tower every day to sweep the floor, and it was neither good nor bad. Within the Rising Sun Palace, no one would pay attention to him. Only Chen Hu would come by occasionally to visit him. In the blink of an eye, another 3 years passed. On this day, two Rising Sun Palace disciples walked toward the martial arts tower. Among the two disciples were one boy and one girl. The boy had black, long hair and he looked handsome. As for the girl, she was a young lady wearing a purple robe. The two of them paused at the foot of the martial arts tower, and the black-haired handsome man asked, Junior sister, is the person who can help you solve the difficult martial arts problem really at the martial arts tower? I am not sure myself. However, Palace Master Chen, who is the one who told me that. He said that the bottleneck that I have come across is a great threshold. Without advice from a supreme person, I might be unable to make it past the threshold forever. Palace Master Chen, who is #1 in spear skills in the Rising Sun Palace. If this is what he said, it is definitely not fake. However, what I did not expect is that even though Palace Master Chen Hu and a few experts who were proficient in spear skills in the Rising Sun Palace had come down personally, none of them were able to give me the correct advice. This even caused the Palace Master to come down personally. However, he could not do anything either. The purple-robed young lady gritted her teeth. Martial arts bottleneck was indeed a great threshold. Moreover, the threshold that she encountered at the very moment would affect her achievements and destiny. Hence, she must think of all sorts of ways to overcome it. Thus, you came to this martial arts tower? The black-haired handsome man glanced at the purple-robed young lady. I have already thought of all sorts of ideas, including going to my master, Palace Master Chen Hu. However, even though all of them had tried all ways, they were still unable to do anything. But yesterday, Palace Master Chen Hu told me that in the whole Rising Sun Palace, or even in the whole Divine Light dynasty, there might only be one person who could help me, and he is in the martial arts tower. The purple-robed young lady stared at the martial arts tower with excitement. Let's go there. The two of them stepped foot on the martial arts tower. However, after searching the whole martial arts tower, they only found a normal old man who was sweeping the floor in the end. Junior sister, could Palace Master Chen Hu be wrong? Where is the supreme person from the martial arts tower? The black-haired handsome man said gloomily. No, not possible. Palace Master Chen Hu would definitely not lie to me. The purple-robed young lady shook her head repeatedly. However, in the whole martial arts tower, there is only one person, which is that old man sweeping the floor. Could he be that supreme person? The black-haired handsome man frowned. The purple-robed young lady's expression turned icy cold. However, in the next moment, she went in front of the old floor sweeper. They then stared at the white-haired old man, who was sweeping the floor with great concentration carefully. However, no matter how they looked, they still felt that the old man was absolutely a normal person. Moreover, he might even be inferior to a normal person. After taking a deep breath, the purple-robed young lady opened her mouth and spoke. Greetings to Elder. I am Ze. The white-haired old man raised his head slowly and revealed an old face. Do you have something for me? I have encountered a bottleneck in my martial arts, and I hope that Elder can resolve it for me. Ze explained her objective directly. Of course, she did not mention that it was Palace Master Chun, who had told her to come. After all, Palace Master Chun who had told her to absolutely not mention his name. Oh, the white-haired old man shot a glance toward Ze, and he exposed her straight away. It's that little kid Chun who asked you to come, right? The eyes of Ze and the black-haired handsome man brightened up. They immediately understood that the white-haired old man in front of them was the supreme person who Palace Master Chun who mentioned. I hope that Elder can help me. Ze greeted the white-haired old man respectfully. Haha, I am just a poor old man who is about to die. Yet, that little kid is still giving me trouble. Jian Wushuang laughed indifferently and looked toward Ze after that. Great timing. I am quite tired now. Since you two little kids have come, both of you can help me to clean the martial arts tower. What? Ze and the black-haired handsome man were stunned. The supreme person in front of them did not even mention helping Ze to resolve the bottleneck problem of her martial arts. Instead, he had asked the both of them to help him clean the martial arts tower. Why? Are you unwilling to help an old man like me? Jian Wushuang laughed. No, Elder. Please take a rest by the side. I will take care of the rest. Ze took over the broom straight away. Junior sister, the black-haired handsome man looked over. Are you really going to help him sweep the floor? This is manual labor to be done by servants. Manual labor? Don't even mention sweeping the floor. If it can help me to overcome the martial arts bottleneck, no matter how difficult the task is, I will not turn it down, Ze said. What if after helping him to sweep the floor, he is still unable to solve your problem? The black-haired handsome man said. Then treat it as me showing respect to an elderly. Ze continued to speak. Senior brother, if you are not willing to help, please stand by the side and not bother me. After finishing her speech, Ze started to clean the martial arts tower thoroughly. The black-haired handsome man frowned and did not say much. He then stood by the side. As for Jian Wushuang, he was lying down on the ground by the side. While lying down, he took out a bottle of wine and started drinking. In the blink of an eye, more than an hour had passed and Ze had cleaned up the whole martial arts tower thoroughly. After that, she went to Jian Wushuang. Elder, I have finished helping you clean the martial arts tower, Ze said, sounding tired. Chapter 1568 Pointers. Chapter 1568 Pointers. The gray-haired elderly, Jian Wushuang, who was drinking casually, looked at the surrounding and nodded in silence. Ze was really sweeping the floor attentively, but didn't intend to take a perfunctory attitude. Not bad. Put down the broom, Jian Wushuang said. Yes. Ze immediately put the broom to the side. You said that you reached a bottleneck in martial arts. Jian Wushuang glanced at Ze. Perform your skill and see. Yes. Ze immediately took out a long spear and performed before Jian Wushuang at the martial arts tower. Although the spear skills that she performed didn't use too much force, it was powerful. She had yet to perform 1/5 of her spear skill. You can stop now, Jian Wushuang spoke. Senior. Ze stopped and looked at Jian Wushuang curiously. Your spear skills are ferocious. It's like a mountain when it doesn't move, and it's like thunder when it does. It's considered a good spear skill, but you are taking a wrong approach in this. You only focused on the movement, but you forgot the most important thing in spear skill: momentum. Jian Wushuang said calmly. Ze instantly stared with her eyes wide open. Her spear skill was exactly like Jian Wushuang had described. It lacked the core of spear skills, which was the existence of momentum. One should know that she had inquired with many experts who were good with spears in Rising Sun Palace. The experts included Palace Master Chun, who They spent a long time observing her spear skill and asked her many questions in order to determine the imperfections of her spear skill. But the ordinary elderly that looked extremely frail could already tell her flaws after he took a brief look, and she had only performed 1/5 of her skill. Just how experienced was he? Ze instantly understood that the person before him was a true superior. He might really be able to help her pass through the bottleneck in her martial arts journey. "Senior, please teach me." Ze immediately bowed at Jian Wushuang politely. "You are too stubborn when it comes to spear skill. You relied on continuous practice without putting any attention on your momentum, but still reached the profound realm. You already shaped the spear skill, and it would be impossible if you were to intend to master momentum from this spear skill. However, if you were to break one move in your spear skill down into 2 or 3 moves, make it from easy to difficult, slowly dissect, and understand them step by step, you might be able to improvise your current situation. Then, your spear skill would be perfect," Jian Wushuang said. "Dissect the spear move? One move into 2 or even 3 moves. How is it possible?" It was as though Ze had heard something unbelievable. The good-looking man with black hair, who stood by the side, was gawking too. "What's impossible?" Jian Wushuang smiled. "Pass me your long spear." Ze didn't hesitate, but immediately passed her long spear to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took over the long spear and started practicing in martial art tower. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The spear shadows whistled, but didn't have too much force. It looked rather ordinary too. However, Ze and the black-haired man were gawking at the sight. They saw that Jian Wushuang had performed 9 moves at one goal. It was an entirely different set of moves, but they could clearly feel that the 9 moves were derived from the 3 moves from the earlier spear skill that Ze performed. The white-haired elderly really did dissect Ze's spear skill. He broke one move into 3 moves, and every move was smooth, just like a one-spear skill. How is it possible? There were billowing waves overwhelming Ze. After showing 9 moves, Jian Wushuang stopped. "Sigh, I'm old now. I just moved a little and I can't take it." Jian Wushuang patted his back and there was sweat on his face. He obviously wasn't pretending, he really did feel weary. "That's it for today. You shall return." Jian Wushuang passed the long spear back to Ze. Ze held back her excitement as she bowed at Jian Wushuang politely. "Senior, I will come again tomorrow." "Sure, but before you see me, remember to sweep the floor in martial arts tower. Although you swept the leaves downstairs today, it'll be covered with leaves again tomorrow," Jian Wushuang said. "Don't worry, Senior. I will definitely clean everything up for you." Ze was delighted. Very soon, Ze and the black-haired man left. On the second day, the two of them came again. Just like Jian Wushuang had commanded, they cleaned up the leaves in martial arts tower too. Jian Wushuang then helped Ze to dissect another 3 moves of her spear skill. Then 10 days flew past. Jian Wushuang dissected Ze's spear skill entirely, and Ze memorized it carefully. Then, she followed Jian Wushuang's instructions to carefully study and comprehend them. Half a month later, she broke through the bottleneck. She mastered the momentum and performed the spear skill flawlessly. The news spread, and the entire Rising Sun Palace was surprised. One should know that the bottleneck that Ze faced, many palace masters and elderlies in the palace had helped personally, but they couldn't resolve it. But then, regarding her solution, the higher-ups in Rising Sun Palace asked Ze personally. When they found out that the person who helped Ze resolve the problem was the ordinary elderly that had swept the floor in martial arts tower, the higher-ups were astonished. Especially when they found out Jian Wushuang's solution was to dissect an amazing spear skill by breaking one move into 3 moves. They had never heard of such a solution, nor did they dare to think of it themselves. Even the master of Rising Sun Palace found it unbelievable. The only one who could understand would only be Chun Hu alone. The higher-ups in Rising Sun Palace instantly realized that the elderly in martial arts tower might not be an ordinary person. Hence, the master of Rising Sun Palace came to martial arts tower personally to visit Jian Wushuang. During his visit, there were many higher-ups of Rising Sun Palace waiting outside Martial Arts Tower. They watched the master of Rising Sun Palace enter Martial Arts Tower and take out a broom. Then, he started sweeping the fallen leaves on the open ground below Martial Arts Tower. It took almost an hour, and he finally swept all of the fallen leaves. Then, the master of Rising Sun Palace returned to Martial Arts Tower. 2 hours later, the master of Rising Sun Palace finally walked out of Martial Arts Tower again. But then, he couldn't contain the joy in him. Superior, he is truly superior. Merely a simple pointer, and I suddenly see the light. My doubts have been instantly resolved. In Rising Sun Palace, there is such an unbelievable superior? No wonder he could bring up an outstanding disciple like Chun-Hu. Chapter 1569. Follow one's mind and nature, mind of the universe. Chapter 1569. Follow one's mind and nature, mind of the universe. The Rising Sun Palace master was extremely emotional. Back then, everyone in the Rising Sun Palace had thought that Chun-Hu's master was only a normal person. For him to bring Chun-Hu to his current level, it was all because Chun-Hu was an outstanding person. However, at that very moment, no one dared to think that way. At the present day, the Rising Sun Master had instructed the experts in the Rising Sun Palace to not spread news of the Supreme Person outside. Time continued to pass by. Jian Wushuang continued to stay at the Martial Arts Tower in the Rising Sun Palace, and just like before, he was unknown to the public. Apart from some of the higher-ups in the Rising Sun Palace, those normal disciples still did not know about him. As for the Divine Light Dynasty, there was nothing about him either. It wasn't until 40 years later that the monarch of the Divine Light Dynasty came down personally to visit him. The monarch had come across a bottleneck in his martial arts, and he was unable to overcome it for a long time. After that, he had managed to get news from unknown sources, and he knew of the existence of the Supreme Person in the Rising Sun Palace. Hence, he held some hope and came to pay a visit. Since the monarch came down personally, the Rising Sun Palace dared not give him the cold shoulder, and they brought him to the Martial Arts Tower to see Jian Wushuang. However, when the monarch raised his problem, Jian Wushuang threw a broom to him and got him to sweep the Martial Arts Tower and the dead leaves at the foot of the tower before coming back to ask him questions. Moreover, the monarch had to do it himself. At once, this caused many experts behind the monarch to be extremely surprised and furious. Although the monarch of the Divine Light Dynasty himself was a bit dissatisfied, he still acted in accordance to Jian Wushuang's instructions, as it was his final hope. The great monarch of a dynasty was actually cleaning up the fallen leaves in front of everyone. If such news were to get out, it would definitely become a joke. However, the monarch did not get angry in the slightest. In addition, after the work was done, he was extremely delighted. This was because Jian Wushuang had solved his problem accurately, and his abilities even went up to the next level. The monarch of the Divine Light Dynasty also understood that the white-haired old man in front of him was indeed a supreme person, and he immediately said that he wanted Jian Wushuang to be his master. With that, Jian Wushuang would have a position that was only inferior to his own. However, he was rejected by Jian Wushuang in the end. The monarch had no choice but to leave. The news then started to spread, and the whole Divine Light Dynasty, as well as even a few dynasties nearby, were in an uproar. With that, a large number of cultivators would come to the Rising Sun Palace to pay a visit every day, as they wanted to meet Jian Wushuang. Thus, Jian Wushuang's peaceful life had completely gone. He knew that he could no longer stay in the Rising Sun Palace, and he left that very day. When he left, he only requested for someone to pass Chun-Hu, who had secluded himself in training, a message. It was fortunate that Chun-Hu had secluded himself in training. If not, he would definitely follow Jian Wushuang immediately. As for the experts in the Rising Sun Palace, although most of them were unwilling to let Jian Wushuang leave, they had no choice. From today on, I must rely on myself to travel around all the lands in this world. Jian Wushuang had a smile on his face. He was wearing a simple black robe and holding a wooden stick in his hand. Moreover, he was also barefooted. With that, he started to travel alone in the Qingtian mystery land. On the streets, Jian Wushuang was walking forward step by step. Jia, jia. Sounds of hooves clopping on the ground could be heard from behind. Although Jian Wushuang wanted to give way, a gust of wind passed by him from his side and caused him to fall to the ground. His arms and thighs started to bleed as a result of him falling down, and his shirt was torn open as well. It was only after a long time that he stood up, trembling. If he were to come across such a situation back then, he might be extremely furious. However, at that very moment, his mind was extremely calm, and he did not feel anything. After that, he continued to walk forward. With the body of an ordinary old man, Jian Wushuang traveled around the world barefoot. During his journey, not only was he bumped into by people many times, he also fell down from the mountains and rolled down from both mountains and rivers. Moreover, he was also robbed by bandits and caught by slave traders before. He had been a beggar, servant, prisoner, and slave. Furthermore, he had used his current abilities to face everything that came his way. However, no matter what he encountered, his life was not in danger. It was not just because of the green feather pavilion expert protecting him secretly. Although Jian Wushuang had white hair, in actual fact his life force was so strong that it was shocking. Throughout the years, he had experienced many hardships. However, no matter what happened, he did not die. During this process, the years passed continuously. Jian Wushuang had stopped being concerned about the time a long time ago. He was even unconcerned about the inverse cultivation test for the third heaven that he was currently experiencing. Not only that, he had also completely forgotten about his brilliance and impressiveness in the past. At that very moment, he was just a normal person. He had completely integrated with his identity as a normal person. Hence, he would deal with anything that came his way with a normal person's eyes and abilities. As for Elder Ming Ba, who kept himself hidden all the while, at the very start, he had sneered at whatever happened to Jian Wushuang in the Qingtian mystery land with contempt, and revealed a compassionate expression, as he then felt that Jian Wushuang was very pitiable. However, as time passed by, he became numb as well. Seems like this Jian Wushuang, who was once an exceptional genius, has completely integrated into life as a normal person. I wonder how long he will remain in this state. Could it be that he will remain like this forever? Ming Ba frowned. He did not care whether Jian Wushuang was going to continue on in his current state. The key thing was that he had to protect Jian Wushuang, and he could not allow him to die for real. If Jian Wushuang were to remain in his current state, and stay in the Qingtian mystery land for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of years, didn't that mean that he had to stay that long as well? Although Ming Ba was very unwilling, he had no choice. In a flash, Jian Wushuang had come to the sky blue mystery land for a total of 5,000 years. Deep inside a big mountain, Jian Wushuang's hair was messy, his clothes were tattered, and his body was thin and weak like a skeleton's. At that very moment, he was looking down. There was a village. It was a village that had been massacred until blood flowed like a river, just like the Chun family village. After seeing such a scene, Jian Wushuang shook his head lightly. There is a cycle of cause and effect. Everything has its own destiny, and even cultivators with strong abilities are unable to change it. This is the same for a normal person. Relative to the Qingtian mystery land, I am merely a passing traveler. Just like my name, Wu Chun, which I used, I will not leave behind any dust or any mark. I will not stir up any trouble or stain myself with dust. Everything will go according to my mind, my nature, and finally my destiny. As Jian Wushuang murmured, his mind was filled with thoughts and feelings. His mind had changed and risen to a new level. By following my mind and nature, I will achieve the mind of the universe. So it's like this. Jian Wushuang laughed. He had lost all his abilities and every aspect of him had lost its worth. The only thing that remained was his mind. Ever since he had achieved the first level of the mind, after so many years, he had also finally achieved the second level of the mind of the universe. And at that very moment, Jian Wushuang's expression changed abruptly. He could feel that small, sudden extra movement within his body. The inverse cultivation test has reached its final stage. Jian Wushuang was still wearing a smile, and he seemed to be unconcerned. He then went to the peak of a mountain, sat down with his legs crossed, and closed his eyes immediately. Chapter 1570. Turn into a stone block for 21,000 years. Chapter 1570. Turn into a stone block for 21,000 years. It was windy at the peak of the mountain, and it was quite chilly. The breeze blew against Jian Wushuang's frail and hoary body, and it was piercingly cold. Jian Wushuang didn't move, but sat there like an old monk in deep meditation. The time flew past. Days, months, and years. Constant exposure to the wind and sun caused a gradual change to Jian Wushuang's body. In the end, he turned into a stone block. Sometimes, there were birds that came to rest on the stone block. Sometimes there were humans that reached the peak of the mountain, but no one worried about the stone block. From what they saw, the stone block looked weird in shape, but not much different from any other stone blocks. During the years when Jian Wushuang became a stone block, Elder Ming Ba, the real god from Green Feather Pavilion, watched him in silence in the void. What is this Jian Wushuang trying to do? Ming Ba was confused. Ever since Jian Wushuang had come to Qing Tian Mystery Land, he had been following Jian Wushuang. He watched Jian Wushuang's experience with his own eyes in the Mystery Land. At the beginning, he had thought that Jian Wushuang already blended into life as a commoner, and he reckoned that he would stay in there for the rest of his life as a commoner. However, he became a stone block and his aura had yet to disperse. Ming Ba couldn't understand at all. But he didn't know that Jian Wushuang was at the final stage of the third inverse cultivation test. Also the most crucial step, change reborn. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang finally understood that what he had experienced during the third inverse cultivation test was the life test. Test of fate. From the peak to the pit. From a top genius in everyone's eyes to a disabled person that had no soul power at all. To a person that everyone respected, and in awe to a poor man that no one pitied. He was bullied and tortured. Everything was in the test of fate. The test was testing his mind. The transformation at heart allowed one to detach from worldly views, become open-minded and accept everything. Then, one could see through the fog before his eyes and return to the peak. Otherwise, they would be doomed forever. Just like real God Wu Bei, when he was going through the test, he once went mad. If it wasn't because he had received a warm welcome at his last stage, and barely maintained an open heart, he wouldn't be able to go through his third inverse cultivation test. Even if he passed through it, he would be drastically different in disposition. But Jian Wushuang was different. From the change of mind during the 3,000 years in lineage of star, to when he had first got to Qing Tian Mystery Land, and saw Chen Village being massacred, and turned into an ocean of blood. He nearly went mad too. He might as well have stayed in Rising Sun Palace for a dozen years. He had lived his life of sweeping floor calmly for a dozen years, and his heart was finally at peace. It was truly peaceful, like an old well with no ripples. Then, he turned into Wu Chun and blended into a commoner's life. He was open-hearted with everything. Do what one finds satisfactory, do what one pleases. Everything went according to fate. After thousands of years, even though he looked pathetic in many's eyes, Jian Wushuang was calm and unaffected. Maintaining his attitude, he turned into a stone block and reached the last step. He used a total of 13,000 years in the last step. He turned into a stone block on the peak of the mountain and towered there for 13,000 years. Finally he woke up. Jian Wushuang. King of Venomous Worms' voice suddenly was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. 3,000 years in lineage of star. 5,000 years of walking in Qing Tian Mystery Land, and 13,000 years as a stone block. In total, it was 21,000 years. This 21,000 years, every year, every day, every hour, even every breath is a test, but you didn't disappoint me. Congratulations. From today onwards you already possess the qualifications to stand at the top of eternal chaotic world. King of Venomous Worms said, and his voice was obviously boiling with excitement. Inverse cultivation, competing with the universe. Under the pressure of heaven and earth, resulting in peak. The third inverse cultivation test, one step was more difficult than the other. Every step was a step through the gate of hell. Over the years, 100% of inverse cultivators that had appeared before had died before the third inverse cultivation test. Previously, when King of Venomous Worms recognizes Jian Wushuang as an owner, he was also worried that Jian Wushuang would die during an inverse cultivation test. But then, luck had turned in his favor, or maybe it should be described as a trapped dragon soaring into the sky. Jian Wushuang passed through all three inverse cultivation tests. From that day onward, his journey of inverse cultivation would have no more tests. He already possessed the qualification to enter the peak expert's rank. Hearing what King of Venomous Worms had said, Jian Wushuang was delighted, but there wasn't a surge of emotion. Slowly he opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, the stone block that he had become slowly collapsed. A large amount of stone started shattering and revealed Jian Wushuang's scrawny and hoary body. However, the hoary body was undergoing a drastic change. Transformation. After passing the inverse cultivation test, the transformation from a universe god in the second heaven to universe god in the third heaven. The transformation then was different from the previous 2 times. There wasn't any divine light that descended, nor any force or movement. Everything seemed rather calm. In the void, Elder Ming Ba in Green Feather Pavilion continued to float there. He had been there for 13,000 years, and he was already impatient long ago. I don't know how long I need to wait for. This Jian Wushuang might as well die. But of all conditions, he was at the brink of death, and I have to keep him company. Ming Ba was shaking his head as he sighs. But his face suddenly stiffened as he noticed the transformation of the stone block at the mountain below. This Jian Wushuang. Ming Ba saw Jian Wushuang's stone block broke down and revealed his hoary body. Then his hoary body, like a piece of dead wood, suddenly recovered its vigor and became strong. Jian Wushuang's skin, which was dry and faintly tainted with yellow, gradually grew rosy. His face slowly became young again. In an instant, Jian Wushuang, who was originally gray-haired, like a man of old age, returned to his appearance of a young man who was once high and mighty, that everyone respected. Divine power, a fluctuation of divine power? Ming Ba stared, and he could feel that not only had Jian Wushuang resumed his original appearance, but his body was also giving out a fluctuation of divine power. The fluctuation of divine power was faint, but it pressured him. This Jian Wushuang, could it be? He has recovered. Ming Ba was shocked at the thought. Just then, on the peak of the mountain, Jian Wushuang, who had returned to his original appearance, his divine body had already completed the transformation. That very moment, he suddenly lifted his head and reined all the lights back in. His eyes, which were deep like vast stars, were looking at Ming Ba directly. That instant, Ming Ba quivered in fear, and his face instantly turned pale. Chapter 1571. A stranded dragon rises to the sky. Chapter 1571. A stranded dragon rises to the sky. How is this possible? Ming Ba was completely stunned. After all, he was a void real god. However, at that very moment, just a gaze at him alone had actually caused him to be terrified, and his expression to turn ghastly pale. What kind of ability was this? Even if Jian Wushuang had really regained the abilities of his peak, he should still not be so frightening, right? Could it be that not only did his abilities recover, he also achieved a great breakthrough, and became a real god? But his aura is still that of a universe god. Ming Ba was filled with amazement. Jian Wushuang possessed a treasure manufactured by the Star Palace Master. However, that treasure could only allow Jian Wushuang to pretend to have the aura of a universe god, and not a real god. In other words, since he had already made a breakthrough to the universe god of the third heaven, the aura that was released from his body was also that of a universe god of the third heaven. At the same time that Ming Ba was shocked, an indifferent voice could be heard. Although I have not interacted with you much, for the past 18,000 years in the Qing Tian Mystery Land. I want to thank you for looking after me secretly. There are 100 million chaos gems here, and they are for you. From now on, you do not need to follow me anymore. Jian Wushuang's voice felt as if it possessed some magical power. When it echoed in Mingba's ears, his eyes became misty. He looked as if he were drunk and he was sleepy. It was only after the voice disappeared for a long time that he woke up with a start abruptly. When he looked down again, he realized that Jian Wushuang had disappeared from the peak of the mountain ages ago, and what was left was only a Qian Kuan ring. What a horrifying consciousness attack. It merely made my consciousness sleepy, and did not make me completely unconscious. Moreover, it did not harm me at all. Such abilities. Looks like Jian Wushuang's abilities have really achieved a great breakthrough. However, he was already ranked third in the universe god ranking list previously. At the very moment, how powerful is he? Mingba exclaimed and shook his head. After he had picked up Jian Wushuang's Qian Kuan ring, he made his way back to the Green Feather Pavilion. He knew that Jian Wushuang did not need him to observe him secretly anymore. Even if he wanted to observe Jian Wushuang, he did not have the ability to do so. Atop the vast sky, Jian Wushuang wore the blood feather reincarnation armor that was made as a blood robe again. He then carried the blood mountain sword on his back and moved slowly. During his journey, he could not help but stretch himself. This feels so good. Jian Wushuang laughed. It was obvious that he was over the moon. Jian Wushuang, you finally feel comfortable now. During the previous 21,000 years, you were even inferior to a normal person, and you almost died an upsetting death. The king of venomous worms gasped in admiration. Haha, a cultivator has his own joys, and a normal person also has his own benefits as well. Jian Wushuang laughed. For the past 21,000 years, minus the 13,000 years that he had become a hard rock, he had lived his life as a normal person for 8,000 years, and these 8,000 years had given him many feelings. No matter what, you have already cleared the inverse cultivation test for the final heaven. Hence, you have gotten past your greatest obstacle, and your journey from now on will be a lot more relaxing. As such, I can set my mind at ease, the king of venomous worms laughed. Also, you must make the best use of your time to think of a way to make a breakthrough earlier to become a real god. As soon as you make a breakthrough to a real god, your ancient god power will achieve the 6th star, and I will evolve along with you. 5-star ancient god and the 6-star ancient god are both great thresholds. As soon as you get past them, your abilities would undergo an earth-shaking change. This change also applies to me. When you become a 6-star ancient god, I will undergo a great change. At that time, I will be able to unleash a fair bit of my fighting capabilities, and I will not need to stay in your body like now and die a depressing death. Haha, don't worry. Since I have achieved the universe god of the 3rd heaven, real god won't be too far away as well. Jian Wushuang laughed. In no time, Jian Wushuang returned to the Divine Light Dynasty again. The Divine Light Dynasty was the place that he had first set foot in when he arrived in the Qing Tian Mystery Land. Within the Divine Light Dynasty, there was another person. He was Chen Hu. Having stayed in the Qing Tian Mystery Land for so many years, he had interacted with quite a number of people. However, among these people, the only person who Jian Wushuang was concerned about was Chen Hu. Divine Light Dynasty, Rising Sun Palace. Even though 18,000 long years had passed, the Rising Sun Palace still existed, and it was even more powerful than it was in the past. In addition, the current palace master of the Rising Sun Palace was Chen Hu. Over the past 18,000 years, his abilities had risen greatly. At that very moment, not only was he recognized as the strongest person by the Divine Light Dynasty, he also possessed the right to stand at the top in the whole Qing Tian Mystery Land. Compared to the past, this little kid has become more mature and sedated. He really has the look of a sect master. Jian Wushuang was floating high up in the skies of the Rising Sun Palace sect. As he looked at everything below him, he had already released his soul power and observed everything within the Rising Sun Palace a long time ago. Naturally, he also saw Chun Hu, who was reprimanding two elders in the lofty palace. Hu Zi, Jian Wushuang opened his mouth. The voice passed by the void and many halls into the highest part of the towering palace, into Chun Hu's ears. Chun Hu, who was scolding the two elders, could not help but be stunned. Hu Zi. It had been very long since someone had called him by that name. It had been about 18,000 years, ever since his master, who he was greatly indebted to, had left the Rising Sun Palace. No one had called him by that name again. At that very moment, a familiar voice and a familiar way of addressing him. Master, master. Is it really you? Hu Zi stood up straight away, and his voice was extremely emotional. This caused the elders in the big palace to become stupefied. They were all pleading for their lives, and they did not know what had happened to the palace master. As for the master who he had mentioned, some elders who had served in the Rising Sun Palace for a very long time thought of a person. The person was a supreme person who had appeared unexpectedly within the Divine Light dynasty. However, the supreme person had left ages ago. At that very moment, could he have returned? Master. Chun Hu was still extremely emotional, and he did not care about how the elders would change their perceptions of him. Hu Zi, listen up. Jian Wushuang's voice echoed in Chun Hu's ears. You were the first person I saw when I first appeared in this world. At the same time, you are also the only person in this world who has interacted a lot with me. Although you and I are not master and disciple, you are still considered to be my partial disciple. Today I am about to leave. However, before I leave, let me tell you something. If you have the time, return back to your previous home to your mother and little sister's burial ground. I have left some opportunities as well as a test there for you. If you have the ability to clear the test in the future, I will accept you as my disciple for real. Moreover, I will also bring you to the vast world that I am in. However, if you are unable to clear it, this means that we are not destined to be together. With that, please take care of yourself. After his speech, Jian Wushuang's voice disappeared completely. As for Chun Hu, he became stupefied at his position, and at the next moment, his eyes started to glow brilliantly. He could not help but clench his fists as well. Master, don't worry. I will definitely pass the test and obtain your approval. Chapter 1570. Turn into a stone block for 21,000 years. Chapter 1570. Turn into a stone block for 21,000 years. It was windy at the peak of the mountain, and it was quite chilly. The breeze blew against Jian Wushuang's frail and hoary body, and it was piercingly cold. Jian Wushuang didn't move, but sat there like an old monk in deep meditation. The time flew past. Days, months, and years. Constant exposure to the wind and sun caused a gradual change to Jian Wushuang's body. In the end, he turned into a stone block. Sometimes, there were birds that came to rest on the stone block. Sometimes there were humans that reached the peak of the mountain, but no one worried about the stone block. From what they saw, the stone block looked weird in shape, but not much different from any other stone blocks. During the years when Jian Wushuang became a stone block, Elder Ming Ba, the real god from Green Feather Pavilion, watched him in silence in the void. What is this Jian Wushuang trying to do? Ming Ba was confused. Ever since Jian Wushuang had come to Qing Tian Mystery Land, he had been following Jian Wushuang. He watched Jian Wushuang's experience with his own eyes in the Mystery Land. At the beginning, he had thought that Jian Wushuang already blended into life as a commoner, and he reckoned that he would stay in there for the rest of his life as a commoner. However, he became a stone block and his aura had yet to disperse. Ming Ba couldn't understand at all. But he didn't know that Jian Wushuang was at the final stage of the third inverse cultivation test. Also the most crucial step, change reborn. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang finally understood that what he had experienced during the third inverse cultivation test was the life test. Test of fate. From the peak to the pit. From a top genius in everyone's eyes to a disabled person that had no soul power at all. To a person that everyone respected, and in awe to a poor man that no one pitied. He was bullied and tortured. Everything was in the test of fate. The test was testing his mind. The transformation at heart allowed one to detach from worldly views, become open-minded and accept everything. Then, one could see through the fog before his eyes and return to the peak. Otherwise, they would be doomed forever. Just like real God Wu Bei, when he was going through the test, he once went mad. If it wasn't because he had received a warm welcome at his last stage, and barely maintained an open heart, he wouldn't be able to go through his third inverse cultivation test. Even if he passed through it, he would be drastically different in disposition. But Jian Wushuang was different. From the change of mind during the 3,000 years in lineage of star, to when he had first got to Qingtian Mystery Land, and saw Chen village being massacred, and turned into an ocean of blood. He nearly went mad too. He might as well have stayed in Rising Sun Palace for a dozen years. He had lived his life of sweeping floor calmly for a dozen years, and his heart was finally at peace. It was truly peaceful, like an old well with no ripples. Then, he turned into Wu Chun and blended into a commoner's life. He was open-hearted with everything. Do what one finds satisfactory, do what one pleases. Everything went according to fate. After thousands of years, even though he looked pathetic in many's eyes, Jian Wushuang was calm and unaffected. Maintaining his attitude, he turned into a stone block and reached the last step. He used a total of 13,000 years in the last step. He turned into a stone block on the peak of the mountain and towered there for 13,000 years. Finally he woke up. Jian Wushuang. King of Venomous Worm's voice suddenly was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. 3,000 years in lineage of star, 5,000 years of walking in Qingtian Mystery Land, and 13,000 years as a stone block. In total, it was 21,000 years. This 21,000 years, every year, every day, every hour, even every breath is a test, but you didn't disappoint me. Congratulations. From today onwards you already possess the qualifications to stand at the top of eternal chaotic world. King of Venomous Worms said, and his voice was obviously boiling with excitement. He himself had been constantly looking for information about the third inverse cultivation test. He had been living in worry for the past years, until then, when he had found out that Jian Wushuang finally passed the third inverse cultivation test, and he could once again be at ease. Then he was naturally thrilled. Once he had passed the third inverse cultivation test, Jian Wushuang's potential became extraordinary. To lineage of star, it of course brought unbelievably great benefits. Soon, Hall Master Yuan calmed down and asked, Jian Wushuang, as you've passed through the third inverse cultivation test, your power should have increased tremendously, right? Power. Jian Wushuang laughed. Every single inversion cultivation test that he had passed through had brought about a transformation, with tremendous changes. His transformation during the third inverse cultivation test was the greatest, and his power had increased at terrifying speed. Hall Master Yuan, my power did increase on a huge scale, but if I don't fight with anyone, I can't gauge to what level my power has reached, Jian Wushuang replied. Is that so? Hall Master Yuan understood. Hall Master Yuan, I shall return to lineage of star now. I'll discuss it with you in detail after I come back? Jian Wushuang said. No, you don't have to rush back. Hall Master Yuan shook his head. Why not? Jian Wushuang was shocked. Jian Wushuang, I have something to tell you. Hall Master Yuan's face grew solemn. 30 years ago, there was an incident that happened at Four Symbol Land in Colored Glaze Sanctuary. A universe god killed an outstanding core disciple of Four Symbol Mansion at Four Symbol Land before all cultivators. The Four Symbol Mansion was curious and started chasing after the universe god. Just that. What does it have to do with me? Jian Wushuang looked confused. Of course it's related to you, because the universe god who chased after was the top genius that wandered with you in Wu Bei's cave, and the one very close to you, Duan Lingfeng. What? Jian Wushuang's face suddenly changed. Duan Lingfeng. Duan Lingfeng was being hunted. How is he doing now? Jian Wushuang asked closely as he grew anxious. He stepped foot into eternal chaotic world for more than tens of thousands of years. During the years, he had a few close friends like Fiery King, Ling Feibai and him. However, among his close friends, the one who had really been through life and death situations with him, and shared a tight-knitted relationship like brothers, was really just one person. And that person was Duan Lingfeng. Back when he had first met Duan Lingfeng, in ancient Stars Sea long ago, Duan Lingfeng and he had joined forces to kill a peak universe god in the third heaven from Sky-devouring clan. Later, in Wu Bei's cave, when they met again, they had also joined forces to deal with one dangerous situation after another. In the end, Duan Lingfeng had even given him a white blaze fruit tree directly. Back then, Jian Wushuang asked him to not reject him if he were to need any favor from him in the future. Jian Wushuang had also promised that, as long as it didn't violate his principles, he wouldn't refuse under any circumstances. Then he found out that Duan Lingfeng was being chased after for the past 30 years. How could he not be worried? Chapter 1573, Four-Symbol Mansion. Chapter 1573, Four-Symbol Mansion. Don't worry. Although Duan Lingfeng's current situation is terrible, his life is not in danger, Hall Master Yuan said. That's good. Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief, and he calmed down immediately. He then asked, Hall Master Yuan, what's going on? I am not sure of the details myself. However, Duan Lingfeng has indeed killed that core disciple of the Four-Symbol Mansion in front of everyone. The Four-Symbol Mansion is the overlord of the Four-Symbol Land, and its position is similar to the lineage of stars in the Star Land. If the core disciples under them were unfortunate and killed while training in the outside world, they could only blame their disciples for being too weak, and not anyone else. Hence, the Four-Symbol Mansion would not go out of their way to kill the other party in order to avenge their core disciples. For example, when Wu Bei's cave appeared back then, many universe gods died. Among the universe gods who died, some of them were disciples of some big sects and big powerhouses. However, since they were killed by others in a fair competition for the white blaze fruits, the big sects and big powerhouses could not say anything. But now, Duan Lingfeng has killed the core disciple of the Four-Symbol Mansion, under the nose of the Four-Symbol Mansion in the Four-Symbol Land. Due to this, the Four-Symbol Mansion got furious, and they immediately sent out experts under them to kill Duan Lingfeng. Fortunately, Duan Lingfeng himself is powerful, and his ability to keep himself alive is quite decent as well. Hence, even though he was chased around by many experts, he still managed to escape to the Burning Demon region. Burning Demon region? Jian Wushuang was stunned. The Burning Demon region was left behind by an almighty a long time ago. Although many years have passed and many opportunities and treasures were plundered, many different kinds of seals still existed in the Burning Demon region. There are both weak and powerful seals as well as seals that are useful for hiding. In any case, there are so many seals that it is uncountable. After Duan Lingfeng escaped to the Burning Demon region, he probably found a place to hide himself. For the past years, the experts of the Four-Symbol Mansion have been searching for him in the Burning Demon region. However, up till now, they were still unable to find him. Furthermore, the Four-Symbol Mansion also posted an extravagant reward of 1,000 million chaos gems, and this has attracted quite a number of real gods within the Four-Symbol Land to join the search for Duan Lingfeng in the Burning Demon region. With so many experts looking, no matter how well Duan Lingfeng hides himself, he will be found by someone eventually, Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang's expression turned grave. He could tell that although Duan Lingfeng himself was alright, his situation was very bad. The moment his hiding place was found by someone, he would be besieged by a large number of experts from the Four-Symbol Mansion. As a universe god, no matter how strong Duan Lingfeng was, he would definitely be unable to stop so many experts. When the lineage of Star obtained this piece of news previously, we acted immediately. After all, Duan Lingfeng is your good friend, and he also gave you that white blaze fruit tree back then. The lineage of Star owes him a favor, and if we could help, we would naturally help. However, that place is ultimately the Four-Symbol Mansion's territory. Hence, over there, the lineage of Star is restricted in every sense, and we cannot do anything at all. I have even sent Lei Chao over personally. However, Lei Chao could only stay at the edge of the four-symbol land. As soon as he makes a move to help Duan Lingfeng, his actions will definitely cause him to clash with the four-symbol mansion, head-on immediately. Even though Lei Chao is an expert in the real god ranking list, confronting the four-symbol mansion within the four-symbol land head-on was too risky. As such, we did not do anything up till now, Hall Master Yuan said. After listening, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. He also knew that the lineage of Star had many scruples, and he could understand. Jian Wushuang, the lineage of Star is unable to take action openly in this matter. However, you are different. Duan Lingfeng, and you are good friends in both life and death. Since everyone knows this clearly, it would be reasonable for you to take action. With this, the four-symbol mansion would be unable to put the blame on the lineage of Star. Moreover, you have just cleared the inverse cultivation test for the third heaven, and your abilities have risen greatly. Therefore, you should be able to help Duan Lingfeng, Hall Master Yuan said. I understand. I will now head to the four-symbol land, Jian Wushuang said. Okay. Hall Master Yuan also nodded his head and said, remember this. Although Duan Lingfeng is your good friend, and you should rescue him, if there is really no choice, you must give up on him. I will absolutely not give up on him. Jian Wushuang shook his head without hesitation. Even then, he still remembered the words that Duan Lingfeng had said back in Wu Bei's cave when Zi Dongwang, Xanju, and the rest of people came to kill him. From the start of my training until now, I do not have many friends. However, Jian Wushuang is one of them. If all of you want to kill him, then that is equivalent to wanting to kill me as well. Jian Wushuang had remembered his words thoroughly. Although the situation back then had not reached the stage where he had no other alternative, Jian Wushuang was still touched. After hearing Jian Wushuang's words, Hall Master Yuan forced a smile and said immediately, all right. After you reach there, you should get in touch with Lei Chao. I have instructed him to wait outside the Burning Demon region. If you really reach a stage where you have no choice, you can send a message to him, and he will act straight away. No matter what, the lineage of Star will not allow anything to happen to you, even if we have to shed all pretense of cordiality with the four-symbol mansion, and have a big fight with them. Understood, thank you very much. Jian Wushuang laughed with gratitude. However, he understood very well in his mind. Sending a message to Lei Chao would be his last resort, if he really had no other choice. Unless necessary, he would not get the lineage of Star involved. Jian Wushuang increased his speed, and headed for the four-symbol land at once. After passing through the wormhole of the island, Jian Wushuang arrived at the four-symbol land. After that, Jian Wushuang traveled at full speed. When he arrived at the edge of the Burning Demon region, a month had passed. Over the past month, Jian Wushuang also requested for Hall Master Yuan to relay information of the Burning Demon region to him continuously. It was really fortunate. The number of experts in the Burning Demon region had increased over the past 1 month. However, until then, no one had managed to find Duan Lingfeng. At that moment, Jian Wushuang took out Duan Lingfeng's transmission token. Duan Lingfeng, tell me your current location. Jian Wushuang sent a message straight away. Jian Wushuang, I heard that you have gone to a mystery land that many ordinary people live in. And now, you have come out of that mystery land. Duan Lingfeng's voice was still indifferent. That's right, I have come out. Moreover, I am currently right outside the Burning Demon region, Jian Wushuang said. Burning Demon region? Duan Lingfeng's voice turned gloomy. What did you come here for? You asked what I came here for, Jian Wushuang said furiously. Cut the crap and tell me your location quickly. After muttering to himself for some time, Duan Lingfeng sent his current location. Jian Wushuang then took out the map of the Burning Demon region that Hall Master Yuan had sent him. The map had marked every corner of the Burning Demon region. At the same time, it also included the locations of a number of seals. However, there were still a small number of seals in the Burning Demon region, that even the lineage of Star did not know of. In no time, Jian Wushuang found the place that Duan Lingfeng was at. Chapter 1574, Jian Wushuang is here. Chapter 1574, Jian Wushuang is here. It's here. Even lineage of Star didn't know that there was a secret trap here. No wonder the experts couldn't find him after so long. Jian Wushuang smiled and instantly sent Duan Lingfeng a message. Just you wait. I'll rush over to meet up with you really quickly. Duan Lingfeng nodded faintly. Jian Wushuang immediately entered the burning demon region and flew in the direction where Duan Lingfeng was swiftly. On his way there, he met a lot of experts who were searching for Duan Lingfeng in burning demon region. These experts were also universe gods, but there was quite a number of real gods too. They saw Jian Wushuang too. Isn't that Jian Wushuang? It's really him. How could it be? Didn't the rumor say that he lost all his power and became a disabled person? But from the looks of it, he has recovered all his power? The experts were astonished. Many years ago, Jian Wushuang's name had spread across 10 cultivation sanctuaries. Even though most of the experts in 10 cultivation sanctuaries never saw him in person, they at least watched the video or image of him launching an attack. Hence, they could recognize Jian Wushuang at first glance. Very soon, the news about Jian Wushuang arriving in Burning Demon Region spread. The experts in Burning Demon Region, who were searching for Duan Lingfeng, were shocked. After all, everyone knew that Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng were best friends. The experts who had seen Jian Wushuang said that he had plunged over, and there was a fluctuation of divine power. Hence, he most likely had already recovered his power. That's why he came to Burning Demon Region, to help Duan Lingfeng to get out of the difficult situation. Four Symbol Mansion received the update, and instantly asked about it with Hall Master Yuan in Lineage of Star. Hall Master Yuan's reply was simple. Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng were best friends, and he definitely would lend a helping hand to his friend. There's nothing we Lineage of Star can do to stop him. If so, I hope Lineage of Star doesn't get involved. As for Jian Wushuang, we Four Symbol Mansion will try to ensure his life. Of course, if he were to kill our experts in Four Symbol Mansion, we Four Symbol Mansion will kill him without hesitation. One of the higher-ups in charge in Four Symbol Mansion said. No problem. Hall Master Yuan agreed straightforwardly, but wasn't worried about it. In Burning Demon Region, it was covered with countless volcanoes, and the territory covered a vast expanse. Jian Wushuang, who carried his sword on his back, was plunging forward at full speed. On the way, although he met experts in Four Symbol Mansion, the experts in Four Symbol Mansion didn't make it difficult for him. However, some tailed behind Jian Wushuang and wanted to find Duan Lingfeng through Jian Wushuang. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang was too fast. Any ordinary universe god, or even a void real god, couldn't keep up with his speed. Very soon, Jian Wushuang flew through the vast expanse, and he was close to where Duan Lingfeng was. Just then, Jian Wushuang suddenly lifted his head, and saw at the end of his sight that two figures were charging over. He knew one of them. Haha, Jian Wushuang, we meet again. There was a burst of malicious laughter from the void ahead, and the two figures stopped before Jian Wushuang. One was a middle-aged man in red armor. The middle-aged man was carrying an axe on his back, and he was obviously a void real god, and he was quite powerful. As for the other person, he was a cold-looking, purple-haired man. It was Zidong Wang, who had fought against Jian Wushuang in Wu Bei's cave previously. The malicious laughter belonged to him. Zidong Wang was originally in the second place on Universe God ranking list, second to God-destroying king. However, after the fight in Wu Bei's cave, he had fallen to the fourth place, behind Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng. However, as Jian Wushuang had lost his power entirely before, his ranking on the Universe God ranking list had vanished. Hence, Zidong Wang had returned to third place. Zidong Wang stood in the void as he glared at Jian Wushuang. He felt Jian Wushuang's aura, and the fluctuation of divine power in him. There was a glimpse of coolness in his eyes. It seems that your power has really recovered. Zidongwang was arrogant and unwilling to admit defeat. Back when he had found out that Jian Wushuang had lost all his power and become a disabled person, Zidongwang had been gratified by his misfortunes. He was thrilled by the fact that he had returned to the third place on Universe God ranking list. Then, Duan Lingfeng was facing life and death danger, and he immediately rushed over. Not only for the 1 billion Chaos Gem bounty that 4-symbol mansion offered, but he also wanted to see Duan Lingfeng be killed with his own eyes. He harbored deep hatred against Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng. He wanted them to be dead. Zidongwang, I have other matters to attend to. I have no time to spare to talk nonsense with you. Move away. Jian Wushuang glared at Zidongwang before him with his pair of cold eyes. Hee, go ahead if you want to leave. I will not stop you, Zidongwang sneered. Jian Wushuang moved without hesitation and detoured around Zidongwang to continue to plunge forward in the void. Zidongwang didn't stop him, but just as Jian Wushuang passed by him. Jian Wushuang definitely knows the location of Duan Lingfeng. Let's go. Let's follow behind him. We can definitely find Duan Lingfeng if we tail him. Zidongwang looked at the void real god, who carried an axe on his back next to him. Then, they followed behind Jian Wushuang. The two of them were extraordinarily powerful and rather good at traveling speed. They could totally keep up to Jian Wushuang's speed. Looking at the two followers behind him, Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Zidongwang, I have no time for you. Go away. Jian Wushuang bellowed. Haha, Jian Wushuang, I didn't stop you. You can go wherever you like. As for if I want to follow you, that's my own business. Who are you to interfere? Zidongwang scoffed. Jian Wushuang immediately stopped and turned around to look at Zidongwang. Zidongwang immediately stopped too and looked at Jian Wushuang as they maintained a distance of more than 1,000 miles. Zidongwang, let me ask you one last time. Are you leaving or not? Jian Wushuang asked in a low voice. I'm not leaving. What can you do about me? Zidongwang teased. Forget about the fact that Jian Wushuang's power had recovered to his peak. Even so, Jian Wushuang at his peak was much stronger than him, but not that much stronger. Plus, there was a void real god who was extremely strong next to him. If they were to team up, they could totally fight evenly with Jian Wushuang, or even suppress Jian Wushuang. If so, what was there to be afraid of? That was what Zidongwang thought. However, what he didn't know was that Jian Wushuang's peak condition that he thought of had remained at the level 20,000 years ago when they were in Wu Bei's cave. But then 20,000 years later, Jian Wushuang already passed the third inverse cultivation test. Chapter 1575 One Stroke. Chapter 1575 One Stroke. Not going to leave. Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold, and the blood mountain sword behind him was unsheathed slowly. Why, you wish to fight? Do you think that I will be scared of you? Zidongwang still did not care about Jian Wushuang. Since you are unwilling to leave, you can stay here forever. Jian Wushuang's voice turned indifferent the instant when his words left his mouth. Whoosh! 18 shadows appeared at the same time. Every shadow of the 18 shadows was as fast as a ghost, and they flew in front of Zidongwang quickly. The 18 shadows swung the long swords in their hands. It was obvious that it was only a normal stroke, and unique skills that were shocking were not used. However, this stroke was too fast. The smile on Zidongwang's face disappeared completely, and he stared at the icy cold sword light, which appeared in front of him persistently. In his eyes, the sword light was becoming bigger and bigger. He then did his best to make a move to block the attack. At the very least, he needed his palm to be before the sword light to block it. However, in actual fact he was too slow. When he had just raised his palm, the sword light had already swept past his neck. Swoosh! A big head was sent flying. Zidongwang opened his eyes big. His consciousness did not dissipate completely right away. However, he could only look on as his head was separated from his body, as he could not do anything. How is this possible? Why did this happen? Zidongwang's mouth was still muttering something. After that, his eyes started to fade out completely. Jian Wushuang then unleashed an impact and reduced Zi Dongwang's body, which had lost any form of life, to fine powder. After that, his eyes looked toward the void real god who was carrying a big axe. Swoosh! The void real god, who was carrying a big axe, was so frightened that he retreated quickly and immediately. Jian Wushuang looked at the void real god coldly and shouted, "If you still dare to follow me, you will end up like Zi Dongwang." "I dare not, I dare not." The void real god shook his head repeatedly. This was no joke. Although Zi Dongwang was only a universe god, he was strong enough to be in the top 4 of the universe god ranking list. His abilities were also stronger than that of a normal void real god, and he was very close to a peak void real god. As such, he was not weaker than a void real god. However, he was still killed by Jian Wushuang. Hence, why would he dare to follow Jian Wushuang? Humph! Jian Wushuang gave a cold hum. In no time, his body disappeared from the line of vision of the void real god. Seeing that Jian Wushuang had left, the void real god, who was carrying a big axe, heaved a sigh of relief. When he raised his head again, his eyes were filled with astonishment. Amazing! This is Zi Dongwang, a peak expert who is ranked 3rd in the universe god ranking list. And that Jian Wushuang is merely a universe god. However, in the end, after taking a deep breath, the void real god spread the news hastily. Zi Dongwang, who ranked 3rd in the universe god ranking list, has been killed by Jian Wushuang in the Burning Demon region. Moreover, he was killed with one stroke instantly. As soon as such simple news got out, in less than an hour, it caused an uproar in the Burning Demon region, for Symbol Land and the 10 cultivation sanctuaries. At a pavilion in the middle of a lake, amidst continuous mountains within the East Royal Sanctuary of the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, a thin, weak young man who looked ill with a pale expression stood up vigorously. Zi Dongwang was actually killed by Jian Wushuang with one stroke. Just one stroke. How is this possible? From the moment the God-destroying king, who was ranked 1st on the universe god ranking list, got his first position, this was the first time that he had revealed a shocked expression. It must be known that even if it were him, and he unleashed all his abilities instantly, he had no guarantee that he could kill Zi Dongwang with one stroke of his spear. However, Jian Wushuang managed to do it. Moreover, according to the real god who witnessed that scene, Jian Wushuang was very relaxed when he killed Zi Dongwang, and it looked as if he did not use his full power as well. Jian Wushuang. Back then, he lost all his abilities abruptly due to unknown reasons, and became a disabled person. Moreover, it is said that he even went to the mystery land that ordinary people lived in. When I heard this news, I felt that it was a pity for this top genius. However, looking at it now, this Jian Wushuang definitely lost his abilities temporarily, due to him practicing some sort of special secret skill. Now, his secret skills are complete, and not only did his abilities recover, his abilities also rose terrifically. Killing Zi Dongwang with one stroke, his current abilities might have surpassed even mine. At the very moment, the God-destroying king could only say that Jian Wushuang might have surpassed him. After all, he did not fight with Jian Wushuang for real. It might just be the void real god who saw Jian Wushuang fighting, making an overstatement. No matter what, he was clear that the exceptional genius with abilities that had overpowered him before during the fight in Wu Bei's cave, and also caused him to be extremely shocked, had returned for real. At the lineage of Star, inside the cave that Hall Master Yuan was in. Haha! The Hall Master Yuan of the very moment was laughing heartily, and his laughter reverberated through the whole cave. This Jian Wushuang has only just entered the Burning Demon region. Even before coming into contact with Duan Lingfeng, he has already caused such a huge commotion. Killing Zi Dongwang with one stroke, hehe. Moreover, he has definitely not unleashed his full power yet. Hall Master Yuan understood that since Jian Wushuang had cleared the inverse cultivation test for the 3rd heaven, his abilities had definitely risen greatly compared to the past. Hence, he could confirm that Jian Wushuang's current abilities were no doubt greater than the God-destroying king's, who ranked 1st in the universe god ranking list. As for how much stronger Jian Wushuang had gotten, he was unable to tell. However, killing Zi Dongwang with one stroke was definitely not Jian Wushuang's full fighting capabilities. For the past few years, quite a number of deacons in the lineage of Star always thought that I favored Jian Wushuang, and that I was too kind toward him. Little did they imagine that Jian Wushuang would be the top genius of the lineage of Star, and that it would be worth all our effort and resources to nurture him. For the past few years, they even looked for me one by one to discuss this matter. Now, I really wish to see what else they will say. After laughing apathetically, Hall Master Yuan informed the deacons in the lineage of Star of this matter immediately. In no time, the lineage of Star was in an uproar. Within the burning demon region, Jian Wushuang was still alone by himself, and he was hurrying in the direction of the place that Duan Lingfeng was. During his journey, his expression became unusually cold. Since back then in Wu Bei's cave, I already couldn't tolerate that Zi Dongwang. However, it's a pity that my abilities were not high enough at that time, and I could only defeat him at best, as killing him would have been too difficult. However, the present is different from the past. As of now, if I'm not wrong, I could even kill the God-destroying king. Hence, even though he is merely Zi Dongwang, he still dares to be arrogant in front of me. He is really courting death. Jian Wushuang was full of murderous intent. In Wu Bei's cave, both of them were fighting for the white blaze fruit. Therefore, even though Zi Dongwang had found trouble for him by trying to kill him, he would not bear any grudge or take revenge against him intentionally. However, at present, Zi Dongwang acted recklessly and came looking for him with trouble. This was indeed being very foolish. Chapter 1576 Hello Duan Lingfeng. Chapter 1576 Hello Duan Lingfeng. Burning Demon Region was left behind by an almighty after all. It was a vast expanse. Although Jian Wushuang knew Duan Lingfeng's location, he required some time to rush over. Jian Wushuang had spread his soul power across long ago, to ensure no one was behind him. Then, he came to where Duan Lingfeng was hiding. He was at a volcano made of crimson rocks. The volcano looked ordinary, but in actual fact, there was a hidden mystery in it. Duan Lingfeng, I found it. Jian Wushuang sent a message and informed him. You should have noticed the prohibition outside, right? I do not control the prohibition, you can only barge in forcefully, Duan Lingfeng said. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. Blood Mountain sword immediately appeared in his hand, while his body instantly barged through the prohibition before him. Not only did the prohibition before him have a concealing function, it also had a decent force. An ordinary void real god would find it difficult to pass through the prohibition using force itself. However, Jian Wushuang only spent very little time before he passed through it. In an ordinary cave dwelling after the prohibition, Jian Wushuang finally saw Duan Lingfeng. Duan Lingfeng looked cold, but he seemed to be in good condition. Duan Lingfeng, it is rare to see someone corner you like that, Jian Wushuang joked. You aren't ashamed to talk about me, huh? When you lost all your power previously, you probably looked more in a fix than I am now. As you're here, I'm guessing you have recovered your power? Duan Lingfeng pouted and asked. I just recovered not long ago. I heard that you were in danger, so I rushed over. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly, and he sighed emotionally. Luckily, he had already passed through the third inverse cultivation test. Otherwise, with his previous condition, he would be in no position to do anything if he were to find out about Duan Lingfeng's situation. Oh yeah, what happened? Why did you opt to kill the core disciple of Four Symbol Mansion in Four Symbol Land itself? Jian Wushuang asked. Four Symbol Mansion was the overlord of Four Symbol Land. Just like lineage of Star and Star Land. To kill the core disciple of Four Symbol Mansion, within the territory of Four Symbol Mansion, wasn't a wise choice. Jian Wushuang, when we first met in Ancient Star Sea, I already told you that I have an enemy. I have always been chased after by that enemy, and even brought brother Luo Yan to death. And that enemy was a huge force in a holy kingdom, Duan Lingfeng started explaining. After I become more powerful, I returned to destroy the force. However, the one who I harbored deep-seated hatred among the Force, also the universe god who I wanted to kill the most, came to 10 cultivation sanctuaries long ago. I entrusted Vientiane Tower to look for this person, and they finally found the universe god in Four-Symbol Land, also the core disciple of Four-Symbol Mansion. He's the person you killed? Jian Wushuang looked at Duan Lingfeng. Yes, Duan Lingfeng nodded. At first, I intended to wait and kill him when he left Four-Symbol Land to wander outside. However, he reached the turning point to break through and become a real god. Hence, he didn't plan to leave Four-Symbol Land during the time, but stayed back to prepare for the breakthrough. Plus, he was a genius disciple in Four-Symbol Mansion. Once he breaks through and becomes a real god, he will be a peak void real god. Then, he will permanently reside in Four-Symbol Mansion. By then, it would be even harder for me to kill him. I have no alternative but to take action in Four-Symbol Land. I seized the opportunity and killed him when he went to prepare for auxiliary treasure. As for what happened later on, you should have known. I see. Jian Wushuang nodded after he heard the story. He knew that Duan Lingfeng wouldn't go haywire and kill a core disciple of Four-Symbol Mansion in Four-Symbol Land for no reason. From what it seemed, he really had no choice. If he were to not kill his enemy, then he didn't know how long he would have to wait till he got the chance to kill him in the future. If I were him, I would definitely make the same choice, Jian Wushuang thought to himself. Duan Lingfeng, your situation now isn't great. If I hadn't rushed here, would you be hiding behind this prohibition and waiting for death? Jian Wushuang said curiously. Wait for death? Of course not. Duan Lingfeng shook his head and his voice became deeper. I am betting that I would already break through and become a real god before the experts in Four-Symbol Mansion found me. Break through and become a real god. Jian Wushuang was stunned and looked at Duan Lingfeng in shock. You're going to break through? When I was chased after, I really did see a chance to break through. Although I didn't prepare much, I could only risk everything and try. When I am hiding behind this prohibition, I have been trying to break through and become a real god, but I have yet to. However, I have a feeling that I will definitely break through and become a real god if you give me more time. Once I break through and become a real god, I am confident I can rush out from Burning Demon Region. Duan Lingfeng clenched his fists. Jian Wushuang heard this, and he was astonished. He thought Duan Lingfeng had no way out, and that was why he had barged into Burning Demon Region for his final struggle. From what it seemed, Duan Lingfeng wasn't fighting like a cornered beast, but he was cutting off all means of retreat to show his determination to push ahead and grab the chance. He lives up to his reputation as a top genius in Eternal Chaotic World, Jian Wushuang complimented. When I was behind this prohibition alone, I had to keep my guard high although I was trying to break through. Hence, the efficiency of breaking through wasn't high. But then, you're here and it's different now. Jian Wushuang, do me a favor. Don't let anyone interrupt me, Duan Lingfeng said solemnly. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile. Go ahead and break through in peace. Let me take care of this. Unless I die, I'll definitely not anyone disturb you. Thank you. Duan Lingfeng looked at Jian Wushuang thankfully, but he entered the depth of the cave dwelling to continue to break through without hesitation. He had to seize the time. Then Jian Wushuang left the cave dwelling and sat outside. After he sat down, he couldn't help but look at the cave dwelling behind him. He sighed. I never thought that at such a crucial moment, Duan Lingfeng would have a chance to break through. So impressive. He's very calm as you. King of Venomous Worms' voice rang in Jian Wushuang's head. You and him are very similar in this aspect. You are the same. The more dangerous it is, the calmer you are, and the more likely you are to grasp the slim chance of survival in a certain death situation. True. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. He calmed down very quickly. This place where Duan Lingfeng is hiding is quite secretive, and the surrounding prohibition is quite unfathomable. The experts in Burning Demon Region will need some more time to find this place. I should prepare myself during the wait. There was a glimpse of light in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Chapter 1577, Narrowing Down the Search Area. Chapter 1577, Narrowing Down the Search Area. Right after Jian Wushuang had cleared the inverse cultivation test for the third heaven and became a universe god of the third heaven, he went to the burning demon region immediately. During his journey, he did not seclude himself in mediation or do any training. However, it must be known that for his abilities, most of them would become a lot more powerful as soon as he achieved the universe god of the third heaven. For example, his sword principles. His sword principles had reached the maximum level for a universe god of the second heaven a long time ago. Moreover, he already possessed higher levels of understanding of sword principles and comprehension. In particular, the accumulated understanding of sword principles from solving the 1000 moves of the Scattered Stars game in Wu Bei's cave had allowed him to possess the ability to create stronger unique skills. However, he was still unable to create them. At the very moment, his realm finally made a breakthrough to the next level. As such, his sword principles would naturally skyrocket, and he would be able to create unique skills that were many levels stronger than before. However, the problem was that he had not studied his sword principles or tried to create new unique skills yet. It wasn't until that very moment when he was inside the seal, for the next period of time before the experts found them, he could let his mind settle down and enhance his own sword principles. Let's begin. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and started his first training after clearing the inverse cultivation test of the third heaven. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 15 years had passed by. During the 15 years, within the burning demon region, the experts of the four-symbol mansion and the experts who came for the reward of 1,000 million chaos gems still had not given up on the search for Duan Lingfeng. Moreover, after searching for the past few years, the search area had become smaller and smaller. Up till the very day. Swoosh! A middle-aged man wearing green armor flew past the volcanoes. The middle-aged man was a void real god of the four-symbol mansion. At that very moment, he was moving and chatting with another void real god via the transmission token at the same time. That Duan Lingfeng really knows how to hide. Although the four-symbol mansion has so many experts, and we have also searched the burning demon region for tens of years, we are still unable to find him. The middle-aged man curled his lips and said, "Haha, there is no rush. Since we can confirm that Duan Lingfeng is still hiding within the burning demon region, we will find him eventually. As soon as we find him, he will definitely be killed. Now he is merely waiting for death." Laughter could be heard from the other party using the transmission token. That's true. The middle-aged man nodded his head. However, at that very moment, his expression changed abruptly, and he stopped moving. The middle-aged man turned around and looked at the volcano that he had just passed through. The volcano looked normal. If one were to look at it with his naked eyes, he would not be able to see anything unusual. However, since the middle-aged man flew past the skies of the volcano, he felt a special sensation. The middle-aged man then headed toward the mountain slowly. When he reached the sky above the mountain, he started to investigate thoroughly. After some time, he got his answer. "There's actually another seal hidden here?" The middle-aged man raised his eyebrows and sent a message to the party on the other side of the token. "I have discovered a hidden seal, and I will go in and take a look first. We shall continue our conversation later." "Alright, please be careful. If you come across Duan Lingfeng, do not confront him. Instead, escape straight away and send a message to us," the party on the other side of the token warned. "Don't worry, although Duan Lingfeng is strong, it will not be that easy to kill me." The middle-aged man giggled, and he quickly charged into the seal that covered the volcano. His abilities were not weak. Although he had not achieved the peak of a void real god, he was already very close to it. Moreover, even though the seal covering the volcano was considered powerful, it would still be very difficult to stop him. After just a short amount of time, he had bypassed many obstacles and was only left with the last obstacle. After getting past the last obstacle, he would be able to observe the real view of the volcano clearly. Haha, break! The middle-aged man swung the big hammer on his hands and was about to smash the final obstacle. However, all of a sudden, an invisible strength headed toward him. The middle-aged man's body shook, and his consciousness turned sleepy immediately. After that, an icy cold sword light lit up and swept past the middle-aged man's neck. It was only when his life was about to come to an end that his consciousness woke up. Aye. As the middle-aged man murmured, his eyes were filled with fright. However, at the final moment, his consciousness still managed to send out a message. Duan Lingfeng is at. The middle-aged man was only able to send a forward message out. After that, the light in his eyes faded away completely. At the volcano covered by the seal, Jian Wushuang was still sitting down with his legs crossed, and he was putting the Blood Mountain sword in his hands back into the scabbard. After that, he raised his head and looked in the direction of the middle-aged man. Due to the seal's interference, Jian Wushuang could see what was happening in the outside world. However, the middle-aged man was unable to see him. Jian Wushuang's expression turned grave. Someone has found this place. Although he was killed by me straight away, there is no guarantee that he didn't send a message out before he died. In other words, the location that Duan Lingfeng and I are in will most likely be exposed. Hence, the experts of the Four-Symbol Mansion would hurry over in no time. Jian Wushuang frowned and glanced at the cave behind him immediately. For the past 15 years, Duan Lingfeng had secluded himself in meditation all the while. Jian Wushuang had also stood guard outside the cave, so that Duan Lingfeng would not be disturbed in the slightest. However, it was not easy to make a breakthrough to real God. Up till the very moment, Duan Lingfeng was still in the midst of making a breakthrough. I hope that he is able to make it in time. If not, Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed with coldness, and he closed his eyes again immediately. At the same time, when the middle-aged man was killed by Jian Wushuang, at a corner that was within the burning demon region, a black-haired, bold old man's body stopped moving abruptly. There was a token on his hands, and the 4 words of the middle-aged man were sent over. Duan Lingfeng is at. However, the message stopped there. The black-haired old man also sent a message with the intention to question him immediately. However, there was no reply at all. He's dead. Real God Qing Ling is already dead. He has definitely found the hiding spot of Duan Lingfeng. Thus, he was killed by Duan Lingfeng straight away. The black-haired old man thought that it was Duan Lingfeng who had killed real God Qing Ling. He then sent a message to the real God experts of the Four-Symbol Mansion at once to inform them of this matter. Apart from being furious, the experts of the Four-Symbol Mansion locked on to a particular area within the burning demon region. Real God Qing Ling has been communicating with me all the while. I have also asked for his location, and he said that he had just passed by the Earth Fire Demon Lair. After that, he continued to talk to me for a short while. Thus, in such a small amount of time, he will definitely still be somewhere close to the Earth Fire Demon Lair, and that was where he died. As long as we conduct a search thoroughly within the range of 1,000 million miles of the Earth Fire Demon Lair, we will definitely be able to find Duan Lingfeng. The black-haired, bold old man was very sure. Thus, the Four-Symbol Mansion narrowed down the range of their search area at once. Initially, it would be very difficult for the Four-Symbol Mansion to find Duan Lingfeng, as there were countless seals within the vast burning demon region. However, at that very moment, the search area had been narrowed down to only 1,000 million miles. Thus, it would be much easier for them to find Duan Lingfeng. Chapter 1578 Found. Chapter 1578 Found. The experts in Four-Symbol Mansion scattered around Earth Fire Demon Lair, within a 10 billion mile range and searched. Merely 5 days later, there were 2 Void Real God from Four-Symbol Mansion that stopped in the air above the volcano, which Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng were in. The 2 Void Real Gods overlooked the volcano below them. I never knew that there was another prohibition here. A lady in black smiled faintly. Real God Huan Ling, it's your call, the cold-looking bald man next to her said. Let me take care of this. The lady in black smiled faintly and immediately started to resolve the prohibition. Burning Demon region was left behind by an almighty, and there were many traps. As such, among the experts that were sent by Four Symbol Mansion to chase after Duan Lingfeng, many had high attainment in formation and prohibitions. The lady in black, real god Huan Ling, was one of them. As real god Huan Ling was resolving the prohibition, in the volcano that was covered by the prohibition, Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. It seems like we can't continue to hide. We have to fight head-on. Jian Wushuang stood up. He knew that once the prohibition at the surrounding of volcano was resolved entirely, Duan Lingfeng, and he would be revealed before Four Symbol Mansion. Then, the experts from Four Symbol Mansion wanted to barge in, and Jian Wushuang wouldn't be able to stop them. After all, the experts in Four Symbol Mansion could totally ignore him and charge into the cave dwelling to kill Duan Lingfeng. Hence, he had to take action before the prohibition was resolved. Blood Mountain sword appeared in Jian Wushuang's hand. Whistle! Jian Wushuang flew out in silence. In the void above, the lady in black was still resolving the prohibition attentively. As for the bald man, he stood next to her. Just then there was suddenly a burst in the air. Although the burst in the air was extremely soft, the bald man instantly noticed. Real god Huan Ling, watch out! The bald man shouted while he immediately wielded a saber. What? The lady in black was frightened. Wow! A brilliant sword light suddenly exploded, and the sword light was so fast that no one could see the trace. Humph! The bald man humphed, and the saber in his hand slashed out like a lightning. It was as though there was thunder from nowhere. The saber collided with the sword light directly, and there was an explosion of fierce power. The bald man retreated from the impact while the lady in black, real god Huan Ling, retreated too. The two of them retreated far away, before they steadied themselves again. The moment the bald man steadied himself, he immediately took out a communication token, found them. Here's where they are. In that instant, the experts from Four Symbol Mansion, who were looking for Duan Lingfeng within the 10 billion mile range, were thrilled with excitement. Found him. Finally found him. He's really around the Earthfire Demon lair. Go, hurry up and go. A large number of experts hurried over. In a short while, there were more than 40 experts from Four Symbol Mansion in the void surrounding the volcano that came. Among the experts who came, besides the few universe gods, the others were all void real gods. There's quite a number of real gods. Jian Wushuang held his sword with one hand as he stood in the void and watched the group of real gods before him. He licked his lips slowly. For a force like Four Symbol Mansion, ordinary void real gods were nothing. Just like Lineage of Star, although there weren't many core real gods who were an appendage to Lineage of Star were quite many. They could easily gather 10 or even hundreds of void real god to Earthfire Demon lair. Then, the real gods from Four Symbol Mansion fixed their gazes on Jian Wushuang. Although Jian Wushuang didn't reveal himself, they were certain that Duan Lingfeng was definitely behind the prohibition behind Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, do you really want to get involved in what happened today? The cold-looking bald man asked in a deep voice. Nonsense. If I am not getting involved, why am I here? Jian Wushuang sneered. Duan Lingfeng is my best friend. If you want to kill him, you have to kill me first. You have guts, the bald man roared. Don't waste time with him. If I'm not mistaken, real god Qing Ling should have died by Jian Wushuang's hands. The old and strong black-haired elderly spoke. Real god Qing Ling was a void real god close to the peak after all. But in the end, he was killed in an instant without any struggle. Duan Lingfeng definitely couldn't do that, but Jian Wushuang could. He killed Zi Dongwang with one stroke. He killed Four Symbol Mansion's real god. Although he was the top genius from Lineage of Star, we definitely can't just let this slip. We need to capture him alive and bring him back to the mansion. Hall Master Yuan from Lineage of Star has to come and apologize personally, the old and strong black-haired elderly said. All right. The bald man nodded, and he looked at the three void real gods next to him who had stronger auras and said, Jian Wushuang killed Zi Dongwang in one stroke. He is powerful. Real God Tong Yi, real God Zhong Hua, real God Bai Hao, the three of you and I team up and suppress him. No problem. The three void real gods nodded. The three of them, and the bald man were peak void real gods. They were the strongest four among the real gods at the scene. If the four of them team up, even if they were to fight against a weaker eternal real god, they definitely could be evenly matched. Let's go, the bald man bellowed. Then, the four fierce auras suddenly exploded, and the four figures plunged forward instantly. Jian Wushuang continued to stand there, but he could feel the pressure that the four fierce auras ahead brought about. However, there was no fear nor worries on his face. On the contrary, there was a glimpse of light in his eyes. I went through the third inverse cultivation test for 21,000 years. During the 21,000 years, I never fought with anyone, let alone fight a life-and-death battle. My body was asleep for too long. I almost forget the feeling of a massacre. But now, I can finally fight a battle heartily. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands, and the blood all over his body was boiling. His intention to fight was billowing. He stared at the four people who were charging at him. Fight, let's fight. Let me see just how strong I am now. With boundless excitement and passion, Jian Wushuang's figure grew illusory. Virum. 18 shadows were cast simultaneously. The 18 shadows under the influence of the power of spacetime pierced through the void easily. The speed of it. The four void real gods from Four Symbol Mansion moved before Jian Wushuang much earlier, but Jian Wushuang rushed to them faster than they did to him. Wow! 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 The 18 shadows wielded their swords all together and swung. It looked as though there were really 18 people launching an attack at the same time. Chapter 1579. Four Void Real Gods. Chapter 1579. Four Void Real Gods. Jian Wushuang had drawn his sword at the same time as the four void real gods. However, his sword principles still clashed with the attacks unleashed by the four void real gods first. Clang! 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 For sounds of metal clashing could be heard continuously. The strong power pulverized the void across the area, and the bodies of the four peak void real gods from the Four Symbol Mansion could not help but retreat. This little kid! What a strange martial art motion. Real God Tong Yi said shockingly. Don't underestimate him. Back then in Wu Bei's cave, he was recognized as the #1 in martial art motion among the universe gods. Now, since his abilities have grown stronger, his martial art motion would naturally be more frightening, the bald man said earnestly. Buzz! 18 shadows appeared again. However, this time around, Jian Wushuang appeared directly in front of the four of them. As he raised the Blood Mountain sword in his hands, the divine power in his body flowed into the long sword continuously. It must be known that back then when Jian Wushuang was still a universe god of the second heaven, he was a universe god who possessed the three strongest sword principles, combined with the ancient god power, as well as the fact that he was an inverse cultivator. His full power was stronger than many of the universe gods of the third heaven. Furthermore, with the secret skill of the blood feather reincarnation armor, his power was not too far from that of a void real god. When he achieved the universe god of the third heaven, not looking at other components, his divine power alone had multiplied tens of times. At that very moment, just his divine power alone had achieved the highest peak of a real god. One stroke of no regrets. Boom! A great amount of sword essence, which contained a faithful will that would not disappear until death, appeared, and it wished to destroy the whole heaven. The void froze and it was extremely cold. When the void was completely frozen, a sword light appeared. One stroke of no regrets. Jian Wushuang had been training within the volcano for 15 years. For this unique skill, it was created from using his accumulation of sword principles from the past, and combined with his own comprehension toward the reincarnation doctrine and spacetime doctrine. Real god-level unique skills were similar to those of a universe god, and they were split into 3 stages. The first stage was equivalent to a void real god. The second stage was equivalent to an eternal real god, and the third stage was equivalent to a chaotic real god. By comparing the levels, Jian Wushuang's stroke was the strongest unique skill of the first stage of a real god. In a situation where Jian Wushuang unleashed his full power at such a close distance, the giant and boundless sword light appeared in front of the four void real gods of the four-symbol mansion with a flash. This stroke, the four void real gods revealed shocked expressions. All of them could feel a great pressure from the stroke, and they also had a sense that they would not live through the stroke if they were alone. "Quick, let's work together to block this stroke," the bald man shouted fiercely at once. The four void real gods acted right away. The bald man swung his saber straight away. At the moment he swung his saber, the shadow of a giant exotic beast appeared behind him. Both the hands of the shadow also raised the saber fiercely, and a towering saber shadow descended mightily. Real god Tong Yi's eyes turned icy cold, and he was holding a black old épée. The black épée contained a huge amount of power. When real god Tong Yi unleashed his divine power, he created a fierce, giant wave which was similar to that of a tsunami. Real god Zhonghua's body was covered by an enormous amount of flames. His palms inside his gloves had also turned completely red. With a shout from him, he clapped his hands once. The flames then turned into a giant fire lion and started to attack madly at once. As for real god Bai Hao, he stabbed the void with his long spear. The void collapsed with whooshing sounds, and a giant black hole, which was rotating crazily, appeared fiercely. The black hole could swallow everything in the universe, and it was launched at that moment abruptly. Jian Wushuang and the four void real gods had only started to fight, and they had only faced each other for second time. However, the four void real gods had already unleashed their full power and used their ultimate moves. Four strong attacks that contained a great amount of power clashed with the giant sword light that Jian Wushuang unleashed instantly. Bam! A frightening, earth-shaking, thunder-like sound could be heard. The sound echoed across the whole universe, and it was extremely loud. The frightening divine power then became a divine power storm that had never existed before. Within the divine power storm, the person who was at the front was the bald man, who had unleashed a towering saber shadow. When it clashed with Jian Wushuang's sword light, it was broken into pieces at once. The bald man's arms trembled, and his saber almost slipped out of his hands. After that, the sword light collided with the tsunami. Swoosh! The giant tsunami was split into two sections, and the expression of real god Tong Yi, who was holding the black old épée, turned pale. He then staggered about and retreated by 3 steps. The sword light continued to sweep across the area mercilessly, and it tore the giant fire lion apart. Real god Zhonghua was extremely shocked, and his palm experienced an unprecedented amount of pain. Lastly, the sword light struck the giant black hole, which was rotating madly, and it twisted into pieces. Real god Bai Hao opened his eyes wide as he realized that the sword light continued to head toward his head after smashing his black hole apart. In a flurry, he swung the long spear in his hands to block the attack. Clang! Real god Bai Hao's body shook, and he retreated in a miserable state. At that moment, Jian Wushuang's 18 shadows burst forth again, and one of them appeared behind real god Bai Hao like a ghost. With a swing of his long sword, the Blood Mountain sword left behind a strange mark on the void, and it was so fast that real god Bai Hao did not have time to block it. Swoosh! His head was sent flying, and a peak void real god died on the spot. Hiss! What? How is this possible? Voices of surprise could be heard across the area. The real gods of the four-symbol mansion were looking at the scene fearfully. Even though 4 peak void real gods of the four-symbol mansion had teamed up to deal with Jian Wushuang, who was alone, after facing each other twice, 3 of them were actually forced to retreat, while one of them was killed on the spot. Moreover, it was one universe god alone who had achieved this feat. Jian Wushuang, the bald man, real god Tong Yi and real god Zhonghua, who were forced to retreat, were extremely furious. They had never expected this to happen. Even though the 4 of them had teamed up, Jian Wushuang had still managed to kill one of them instantly. Moreover, when Jian Wushuang was fighting them, He did not seem worried at all. How dare you? Previously, you killed real god Qing Ling of the Four-Symbol Mansion. Now you have killed real god Bai Hao. Do you really think that as a top genius of the lineage of Star, the Four-Symbol Mansion won't dare to kill you? The bald man was extremely furious. His voice was filled with a bit of madness, and he shouted, "Everyone, Jian Wushuang killed the real gods of the Four-Symbol Mansion again and again. This shows that he does not care about the Four-Symbol Mansion at all. Since this is the case, we do not need to show him any mercy. All of us are to attack together and kill him. Kill! Kill him!" The eyes of the surrounding real gods of the Four-Symbol Mansion started to turn a scarlet color. In no time, a total of close to 40 void real gods attacked at the same time. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.